The din of voices and the clang of steel resounded across the bustling Tourney grounds beneath the warm sun of King's Landing. Banners of every color stretched above the crowd. Lions of gold on crimson, wolves of gray on white, stags crowned in gold, mockingbirds and flowers and tridents. The air smelled of horse sweat, churned earth, and the perfume of 1,000 bodies drawn by the promise of spectacle. Noble ladies fanned themselves in the sweltering heat, their silks shimmering. Armor glinted brightly, polished to a mirror finish by squires bustling in every corner. The entire city had been abuzz for days in anticipation of the Tourney of the Hand, a great event to honor Lord Eddard Stark's ascension to the position of the King's Hand. Now it was upon them, and the crowd's energy was a living thing, pulsing and eager. Lord Eddard Stark of Winterfell could feel the heat pressing down upon him, as if the southern sun had singled him out for torment. His northborn blood still had not adapted to the southern climate, and sweat beaded along his brow beneath his modest black velvet cap. From his seat upon the high dais, he squinted out across the tilt yards. His heart was weighted more by secrets than by heat. He had not wanted this tourney. He had argued with King Robert that the city's coin could be better spent on securing food for the small folk, that the realm's coffers were already strained, but Robert Baratheon had been as stubborn as ever. The king simply laughed off Ned's concerns. Grand festivities were a king's privilege, and he would not be denied. Yet the tournament was not the only cause for Eddard's tension. Over the past weeks, pieces of a disturbing truth had fit themselves together in his mind, like fragments of a puzzle that kept him awake at night. Jon Arryn's final words, "The seed is strong," and his own investigations had led him to a damning secret. Joffrey Baratheon, the heir apparent to the Iron Throne, was no true son of King Robert. The boy's golden hair was a Lannister trait, the product of an incestuous liaison between Queen Cersei and her twin, Ser Jaime, the Kingslayer. Ned had discovered the same truth that had likely cost Lord Arryn his life. He still remembered the dread that had coiled through him when Cersei herself had stood before him in the Godswood, her green eyes luminous with threat, telling him in no uncertain terms to tread lightly. She had tried to make her case, defending her children, speaking of what she claimed were her own justifications for the deception. But Ned had left that meeting knowing that war was on the horizon if the truth ever came out. He had long weighed what to do. Honor demanded that he tell Robert. Honor demanded that a false heir not be allowed to sit upon the Iron Throne. But even honorable men had duties beyond the immediate satisfaction of exposing a lie. War would tear the Seven Kingdoms apart, and Ned's greatest hope had been to persuade Cersei to flee. He had given her time, only to preserve the realm from bloodshed. Now the chance for discreet resolution had slipped through his fingers. Too many eyes were upon him, and rumor was a wildfire that would catch if not immediately contained. The tension in King's Landing was near to bursting. More than one pair of watchers had begun to look suspiciously at Ned himself, as if expecting him to make a bold move. Sometimes he caught the eyes of the Queen studying him from the shadows, always calculating. The Tourney of the Hand had begun with the fanfare of trumpets. King Robert's laughter boomed in the air every time a jousting lance struck a shield. The king was large and red in the face, gulping wine with abandon as he cheered for the brave knights who shattered their lances for his entertainment. Cersei Lannister sat at his side in a gown of green velvet that brought out the shining gold of her hair. Next to her, Joffrey Baratheon perched, scowling one moment and preening the next, secure in the knowledge that he was the heir, the center of all that was important. Princess Myrcella looked up at her mother from time to time, all sweet courtesy and budding prettiness, and the younger Prince Tommen stared wide-eyed at the spectacle before him, as if he could hardly believe the thunder of hooves and the cries of the crowd were all real. Ned's daughters were seated to his right. Sansa leaned forward on her bench in breathless wonder whenever a brightly armored knight rode past, her auburn hair shimmering like polished copper. It was her dream come true. Handsome knights, lovely ladies, songs of gallantry. Arya, on the other hand, sat sullen, her attention wandering from the jousting to the buzz of the crowd. She did not care for pretty pageantry. She wanted the real steel of practice swords in the yard. Across the grounds, near the royal pavilion, Tyrion Lannister was conspicuous by his small stature and sharp wit, bantering with some visiting lords. Ser Jaime Lannister was far more visible, clad in gilded armor so bright the sun's reflection hurt the eyes of onlookers. It was said the Kingslayer intended to ride in the tourney before day's end, though that was overshadowed by the presence of the Hound, Sandor Clegane, at Joffrey's side, and of course Ser Gregor Clegane, the Mountain, who had unhorsed men left and right. The day promised excitement and perhaps blood. Ned's stomach clenched. He knew that if he continued to hold the secret, Robert would continue his heedless ways, and the realm would remain oblivious until the truth came out in a storm of steel. The more days passed, the less secure Ned's position became. Varys, the master of whisperers, had dropped hints that the Queen was growing suspicious, that certain lords might be used to remove him from power if he threatened her children's claims. Littlefinger, with his mocking smile, had offered cryptic warnings of his own. In secret, Ned had read and reread the lineage of House Baratheon, seeing the black hair repeated over generations. Yet Joffrey's hair was gold, and that gold spoke of a darker truth. He felt a final sting of duty. If he spoke now, in public, with the king present, there would be no easy way for the Lannisters to silence him. All the realm's eyes would be upon him and Robert. He looked out at Robert, who roared with approval as another knight crashed into the dirt. Ned remembered Robert's youthful face all those years ago, so full of laughter and life. He thought of Jon Arryn, who had tried to protect Robert even in death. He thought of the realm and the war that might ensue. But honor was a heavy burden, and Ned Stark had carried it all his life. The first tilt ended, and the heralds announced a short pause for the next juicer to prepare. A hush fell across the stands as spectators shifted in their seats, and the king's attention wandered until he bellowed for more drink. Cersei's expression was a mask, though one could detect the faint lines of irritation at her husband's excesses. Joffrey fidgeted. The hush was the perfect moment, a space waiting to be filled. Ned stood from his seat. He removed his cap and ran a hand through his damp hair. The hush deepened as people noticed the hand of the king was rising to speak. The herald, uncertain of this unplanned address, hesitated, and the movement of the yard grew still. All eyes, lords, ladies, and small folk in the cheaper stands, began to turn to Lord Eddard Stark. Ned's voice, rough with tension, carried in the sudden silence. "Your Grace," he began, speaking toward Robert, "there is a matter of grave importance I must speak on." Robert, dazed with wine, blinked at him. "The tourney is not done, Ned," the king said. His voice boomed, though a slur of drunken humor underlay it. "Speak after the final tilt. Why don't you?" "I beg your pardon, Your Grace, but this cannot wait." Ned could sense the coiled attention from Cersei, who, behind her mask, grew as rigid as stone. Joffrey's pale green eyes flicked from the jousting lists to Ned, a thin sneer curling his lip. Jaime Lannister's mouth tightened. The hush turned suffocating, so that even the horses fidgeting on the sidelines could be heard. Something in Ned's voice must have finally penetrated Robert's wine-addled cheer. The king shifted in his seat, glancing from Ned to his queen and back. "Speak, then," he said more cautiously, a note of confusion stealing into his tone. Ned took a breath. He could feel his heart pounding in his ears, and yet a deep calm wrapped him as he prepared to say the words that would change the realm forever. "Jon Arryn was murdered," Ned said loudly enough for all to hear. A gasp rippled through the onlookers. "He was murdered, I believe, to conceal a truth he had discovered, a truth about your heirs." As soon as those words passed Ned's lips, he felt as if the world itself drew a collective breath. Robert's wide eyes narrowed. "My heirs?" he repeated. "What madness is this?" Cersei's hands were tense upon the arms of her seat. Joffrey, uncertain, opened his mouth as if to speak, but shut it again. From the corner of Ned's eye, he saw Littlefinger's face go pale, a flicker of alarm behind his mocking glance. Varys stood very still, his expression carefully composed, while lords and ladies craned forward, and the murmurs spread like ripples in a pond. Ned forced himself to continue. He would not falter now. Your Grace, your children, Prince Joffrey, Princess Myrcella, and Prince Tommen, are not of your blood." Gasps swelled into a wave of outcry through the stands, some half-audible exclamations of shock and confusion. Ned raised his voice to carry over the tumult. "They were not fathered by you, but by the Queen's brother, Ser Jaime Lannister." For a heartbeat, there was no sound at all. Then came the roar. It rose from every corner of the yard, a wild clamor of outrage, astonishment, and disbelief. The king surged to his feet, nearly toppling the goblet of wine from the table. Cersei also rose, though her face had gone white as bone, her composure nearly cracking. She seized Joffrey's arm with her slender fingers, as if to keep him from lunging forward. The boy's face was twisted in fury, but there was fear behind it. A storm had just broken, and everyone in King's Landing was caught in its winds. "How dare you?" Cersei spat, her voice carrying. Her eyes blazed with a savage desperation. "You think you can slander my children?" Robert swung towards Cersei, a flash of confusion and sudden fear in his features. "Speak, woman. Tell me this is a lie." Cersei's lips parted, and for a moment she seemed to gather herself, composure returning like a steel plate locked into place. "This is a vile falsehood," she said, her voice trembling with righteous indignation. "He has conspired with our enemies, your grace. The Starks have never been friends to the Lannisters." Ned forced himself to press on. "Jon Arryn died for this truth," he said. "He was searching the royal lineages. Every Baratheon in recorded history has black hair, yet your children are all of golden hair." He turned to Robert. "You can see it with your own eyes, your grace, if only you look. The truth is there." Amid the startled crowd, Tywin Lannister had not yet arrived. He was absent from King's Landing at this time, but many other powerful lords were present, some sworn to the crown, some to the Lannisters, and many with no clear loyalties. People stood or half rose from their seats, outraged or stunned. The gold cloaks, scattered in small numbers among the stands, looked to one another uncertainly. Robert stood unmoving. This was the moment that decided everything. If Robert believed Ned, it meant the end of Joffrey's claim. It meant war with the Lannisters, or at least a violent confrontation. Cersei realized this as well, for Ned saw her hand slide subtly toward Robert's arm. She spoke softly to him, but the hush allowed her words to carry. "You cannot believe him," she said, desperation edging her tone. "He is but repeating vile rumors. For the sake of our children, your children, dismiss these slanders at once." But Robert's eyes had taken on the wild sheen of anger and heartbreak. "I remember," he said in a thick voice, eyes flicking from Joffrey to Myrcella and Tommen. "I remember how every bastard of mine had black hair. There was that serving girl in the Vale, Maya Stone. The boy in Storm's End, Edric, mine as well. But my own lawful son stands here gold of hair, with the face of a Lannister." His meaty hands shook. "Why have I never questioned it?" Cersei's calm began to crack. "You were drunk or whoring or off hunting. You never cared to see. You never cared for me." Her voice grew shrill, but she quickly smoothed it, turning pitiful. "Do not let this snake poison your mind, my husband. He only seeks to sow discord." Ned locked eyes with Robert. He saw sorrow and confusion swirling in the king's gaze, the heartbreak of a man who realized the life he thought he had was built on a lie. Robert was no fool. He might be a man who drank and feasted and shirked his duties, but he was neither blind nor too proud to acknowledge certain truths. He looked at Joffrey with an expression of horror, which only grew when he flicked his glance at Myrcella and Tommen. Joffrey snarled, "Your Grace, let me defend our honor. This man." But Robert did not even look at him. The king's breathing grew ragged. He turned to face Jaime Lannister, who stood below the dais, near a group of knights. The Kingslayer's face was pallid as he looked up at the dais. He no longer wore the smug grin he so often displayed. His hand rested lightly on the hilt of his sword, but he had not drawn it, not yet. "Jaime," Robert said. He spoke low, but in the hush, every word seemed to echo. Is this true? Jaime opened his mouth, but for once had no glib remark ready. Something flickered in his green eyes, and he looked at Cersei before replying. Then, facing the king, he said, "Your Grace, He never finished. Robert let out a roar of wordless fury, launching himself forward. Had the dais not been so crowded, the king might have hurled himself onto Jaime right then. But at that moment, the gold cloak stationed near the dais sprang into action, uncertain of who to protect and how. Cersei seized Joffrey's wrist and pulled him back. Myrcella began to cry in confusion, and Tommen's face was white with terror. All the while, the crowd was a storm of noise, shock, and swirling speculation. Men shouted for the king, for Lannister heads, for Stark, for calm. Lords tried to restrain their guards from rushing forward. Onlookers shoved one another to get a better view. Some soared into righteous condemnation of the Lannisters, while others demanded the king punish Ned Stark for insulting the royal family. Robert turned his glare onto Cersei, chest heaving, his face a mask of wrath. "You vile whore," he choked out, half drawing his sword. "You murder my friend. You murder the hand who raised me to be a king, and now you would place your bastard upon my throne?" Cersei's composure was gone, replaced by desperation. "He's your son," she cried. "He always has been your son in the eyes of the realm. You can keep believing that. We can forget all this." Robert brandished his sword, and those nearest him recoiled, uncertain if he might strike out wildly. "Stop lying," he snarled. "Stop." Ned forced himself to look away from the Queen and address Robert directly. He had known Robert for many years, had seen him in rage, grief, and bitterness, but never had he seen him so undone. "Your Grace, you must be calm," he said. "This secret is out. We cannot pretend otherwise. If the realm hears it only through rumor, war is sure to follow." "And you would blame us for murder?" Joffrey shouted, his face red with fury. "You speak lies. The Starks are traitors." "Silence," Robert bellowed. His words rang across the yard like the toll of a bell. Joffrey shrank back, momentarily cowed. Robert's hand trembled around the hilt of his sword. "Your Grace," repeated Ned, trying to keep the king focused. "It was the Lannisters who had reason to kill Jon Arryn once he discovered the truth. Doubtless it was them who tried to kill Bran in Winterfell when he saw something he was not meant to see. And they will not stop until the throne is secure in their boys' hands, or until we act. But you are the king. The power is still yours." Cersei's gaze snapped to Ned, blazing with hatred. "You vile meddler," she hissed. "Your daughter, Sansa. She is betrothed to Joffrey. You would ruin her as well." Ned stiffened. That had weighed heavily on him too. Yet Sansa's betrothal could not stand once the bastardy was revealed. The entire foundation was false. Sansa looked terrified, her eyes darting from Ned to Joffrey, as if she could not comprehend how her fairy tale had turned so grotesque. Arya had half risen from her seat, as if she wanted to run to her father's side or perhaps to drive a sword into someone. "What is to be done?" Robert demanded, as if seeking direction, as if bereft of his own will. Tears threatened behind his fury. "Gods be good, Ned. What do we do with them? They have made a fool of me." All illusions of courtesy and ceremony were gone. This was bare, raw monarchy in conflict. Ned kept his voice steady. "Your Grace, it is not for me to decide, but if the realm is to be spared, you must take control. The Queen and Ser Jaime must be taken into custody. The children," Ned faltered, for they were indeed children, and Tommen and Myrcella were innocents in all this. Joffrey, for all his cruelty, was only a boy too, but a boy who might grow up to hold the power of the throne by treachery. "We must handle them gently, I ask you," Ned said. "They are your wife's children, though they are not yours by blood. Above all, we must preserve order." At these words, Cersei's pride reasserted itself. She drew herself up with all the haughtiness of a queen who had been cornered. "You presume to decide my fate?" She flung back her head. "I am Queen Regent. My father is Lord Tywin Lannister, Warden of the West. You think you can simply place me under lock and key? Jaime's hand was on his sword, his entire posture radiating tension. He did not fear Robert's prowess in single combat. Indeed, many said Jaime was more skilled with a blade, but to draw steel on the king in the midst of hundreds of witnesses was a doomed proposition. And even Jaime Lannister must have realized that if he cut Robert down, 1,000 swords would see him dead in moments. Yet the alternative was to allow himself, his sister, and the children to be seized. Perhaps he was calculating that Tywin Lannister would not let this stand, that an army of Lannisters would march on King's Landing to avenge such an insult. So it was that the stands, the dais, and the yard stood in trembling suspense, all eyes on the dais, waiting for a single spark that would set the city alight in blood. A hush so profound fell that one could hear the shuffling steps of a stable boy far across the grounds. Robert Baratheon, King of the Undulls and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, let out a long, trembling breath. He lowered his sword arm slightly, though he kept the blade unsheathed. "I will not see my kingdom undone by your treachery," he said to Cersei. "Treason is what this is, treason against the crown, the realm, and me, your own husband." Cersei tried once more. "Robert, let us discuss this in private." "No," the king replied, voice cold as ice. "This is done in sight of gods and men. None will say I quashed the truth behind closed doors." He gestured to the gold cloaks nearest them, some of the city watch who had remained loyal to the crown above any house, at least for now. "Arrest the queen." Chaos exploded again. Cersei tried to retreat, but there was nowhere to go. Her eyes swept the yard, looking for rescue. Jaime's knuckles were white around his sword. When two gold cloaks approached, he stepped forward at once, voice sharp. "Stand aside or die." The men hesitated, glancing at their king. Robert's eyes flashed. "You would draw steel against your king, Lannister? Do so and I'll have your head." Jaime's stance was tense, and he flicked a glance to his sister. This was Jaime's nature, to fight for Cersei at any cost, but also to weigh the folly of that action. The world seemed poised on the brink of a monstrous confrontation. Then, as if by some mental accord, Jaime slowly unclenched his grip and lifted his hand from the sword, letting the handle remain in its sheath. "I do not fear you, old man," he said quietly, "but I won't see her harmed." "She has harmed herself?" Ned snapped, though quietly, stepping forward. He hoped no one would be foolish enough to begin a melee in the middle of the crowd. "Sir Jaime, do not make this worse." The gold cloaks reached for the queen. Cersei had no weapon, but she had no shortage of pride. "You dogs!" she spat, stepping back. "Unhand me!" She turned, and seeing no help, she cast one last withering look at Ned. "You will regret this," she breathed. "All of you will regret this." Joffrey let out a shrill yell. "Leave my mother alone." He lunged forward, but was quickly seized by two more members of the watch. The boy's face twisted in fury, terror, and confusion. Sansa gasped. Arya pressed her lips together and balled her fists, not sure where to look. Myrcella was sobbing, clinging to Tommen. Both children were overtaken by uniformed men who clearly did not relish manhandling a princess and a prince, but could not defy the king's command. Robert had never looked so broken. His voice was that of a man who walked a path he had never chosen. "I will hear no more from you," he said to Joffrey, though not with the anger from before. "We shall see the measure of your guilt in due time. Gods have mercy on us all." The city watch forcibly escorted Cersei, Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen from the dais, ignoring their protests. Jaime followed, swearing he would stay by Cersei's side, though the gold cloaks surrounded him too, wary of letting him come too close to the king or Ned. Step by step, the dais cleared of Lannisters. The courtyard rang with shouts, half cheers, and half condemnations. None had expected to see the downfall of the queen so publicly. A hush of awe and foreboding began to settle over the crowd as the reality sank in. The king's own children, bastards? The queen arrested for treason, the Kingslayer as her lover? This was a scandal that would thunder across the Seven Kingdoms. Robert stood with his sword dangling, searching the faces around him. When his gaze landed on Ned, there was a moment of silent understanding. A flicker of gratitude or perhaps betrayal, Ned could not tell. Then Robert turned abruptly and strode away from the dais, cursing, shoving past onlookers to find some measure of solitude. Half a dozen Kingsguard men hovered, uncertain whom to protect, but Ser Barristan Selmy, White Cloak and living legend, cleared his throat and followed after Robert, motioning for the others to do the same. Ned sensed a chill. The deed was done. The king knew. The city knew. In one blow, House Lannister's hold on the throne had been shattered. Or so it seemed. The reality, Ned well knew, was that the Lannisters would not take this quietly. Lord Tywin commanded one of the greatest armies in Westeros, and he was sure to march in retribution. The small folk, hearing that the royal children were no true heirs, might descend into chaos or might rally behind Robert if he acted decisively. But war was on the wind. Still, Ned Stark had done what he believed was right. The realm deserved the truth, and the true line of succession must be upheld. He had prayed the gods might let there be a gentler solution, but those prayers had gone unanswered. He turned, put a hand on Sansa's trembling shoulder, and nodded for Arya to follow. It was time they left the dais. Every eye in the yard was still on them. As they walked, men and women parted to allow them passage, a mixture of awe, dread, and uncertainty in their faces. Some were lords sworn to the crown. Some were Sellswords or hedge knights who had come for the tournament's gold. Some were small folk who had never seen such high drama in all their poor years of life. Ned's thoughts were full of the consequences as he escorted his daughters back to the Red Keep under a heavy guard. He knew the next hours and days would be fraught with danger. Cersei was cunning, Jaime was proud and lethal, and Tywin Lannister would not let this pass. The best hope was to secure the city, ensure Robert's full commitment to removing any Lannister influence from positions of power, and put forth the rightful heir in the event of Robert's untimely death. Whether that heir would be Stannis Baratheon or Renly Baratheon was a question of law, and Ned had no illusions that either brother might greet this news with calm acceptance. In all likelihood, each Baratheon brother would begin moves of his own, for the throne was both a blessing and a curse, and ambition stirred many hearts. But for now, the vital first step had been taken. The city's illusions were shattered, and truth, however ugly, was out in the open. The halls of the Red Keep were abuzz like a hive of disturbed bees. Courtiers whispered in corners, guards marched hurriedly through passages, and stewards scurried to and fro. Tidings of what had occurred at the tourney spread through the keep in frantic murmurs. Ned's arrival with his daughters drew stares from every corner. Sansa clung to him, wide-eyed, her world of romantic illusions shredded in a single afternoon. Arya walked behind them, more anger than fear in her young face, eyes darting about as though expecting a threat at any moment. The corridor leading to the Tower of the Hand was lined with guards in stark livery and a smattering of gold cloaks who had come under the Hand's command for the moment. Upon spotting Ned, they bowed and parted to let him through. Within the Tower of the Hand's great hall, waiting with worry etched upon her face, was Septa Mordane, and behind her a cluster of servants. Sansa rushed to her septa, sobbing the moment she felt the woman's arms enfold her. Arya stood stiffly, refusing comfort, wanting only answers. Ned dismissed the servants with a quiet word, instructing them to remain on standby for further orders, and indicated that the guards should keep the tower secure. Then, in a low voice, he bade Arya to go with Septa Mordane and Sansa for the time being. Arya opened her mouth to protest, but saw the worry in Ned's eyes and nodded silently. Once the girls were led away, Ned was alone in the main chamber but for two loyal Stark guards. He sank onto a chair, feeling the exhaustion of a decision that had changed his life and the realm's fate in a single stroke. He had wanted to protect his daughters, to protect the realm from chaos. Yet he remembered the words of his friend, the late Jon Arryn, "The seed is strong." He remembered the hush in the sept, the gloom in the library, the hasty words with which Jon's wife, Lisa Arryn, had fled to the Eyrie, and he realized that destiny had always pointed him down this path. He did not have long to reflect. There came a knock on the chamber door, followed by the entrance of Lord Petyr Baelish, known as Littlefinger, accompanied by Lord Varys, the Master of Whisperers. Both men bowed with elaborate courtesy. In their faces, Ned read a swirl of intrigue. They had no doubt come to gauge the shifting winds and ensure they were on the side of the victor. "Lord Stark," said Littlefinger with that half-smile of his, "I trust the day has gone exactly as you planned?" His tone was airy, but there was a faint tension beneath it. Ned met his gaze coldly. "Lord Baelish, I did what was necessary. We shall see if it was enough. Have you come to offer your congratulations?" Littlefinger chuckled. "Congratulations? The realm is in uproar. The king's children have been labeled bastards. The queen and her brother are under arrest, and half the city must be anticipating a Lannister retribution. No, my lord, I did not come to offer congratulations. I came to remind you that King's Landing is a pit of snakes, and you have just kicked the nest. If you desire the city's loyalty, you will need to act swiftly. The gold cloaks follow whoever pays them. At present, you hold their loyalty by a thread." Varys spread his soft hands. "His Grace seems determined to punish the Queen, though what that punishment entails remains to be seen. Treason, incest, gods be good, these are grave matters. I have heard that Ser Jaime is fuming in his temporary confinement. Rumor says he demanded a trial by combat." Ned exhaled. "And the children? They are to be treated gently. They are not at fault for being born of incest." Varys bowed his head in acquiescence. "Of course, my lord. I expect Robert Baratheon will not be too harsh, though Joffrey is another matter. That boy is volatile, as you know." Littlefinger studied Ned for a moment, then said, "Where do you see all this leading, my lord? Robert might become a new Tywin Lannister, a man hardened by betrayal and ready to wage war. Tywin will not stand idle. There is talk already that he is gathering his bannermen. The price of revealing the truth can be quite high." Ned rose from his chair, glaring at Littlefinger. "Do not speak as if I had a choice. The throne cannot rest on a lie. The realm must see that justice is done, so that the next generations do not pay for our silence. War may come, but that would have been the outcome eventually, had Joffrey been crowned king and the truth emerged later. Now at least Robert holds the throne and can act." Littlefinger's grin was a ghost. "Indeed, I suppose I cannot fault you for your honor. Still, your next steps will be crucial. The city watch is yours, for now, but tomorrow could be different if the king's coin is overshadowed by Lannister gold. Besides the watch, there are the great houses, Tyrell, Martell, Greyjoy, Tully, Arryn, Baratheon. Each will have their own reaction." Varys nodded sympathetically. "And let us not forget King Robert's brothers. Lord Stannis is the elder, rightful heir if the throne should pass from Robert. Lord Renly also has many friends among the young and ambitious. The lines of succession may be tested, I fear." Ned's lips tightened. "I will speak with the king. He must name his heir openly before the realm. It must be Stannis by all the laws of the land. We need to secure the city in the name of House Baratheon and guard against any Lannister retaliation. If Tywin attempts to march, we must meet him on the field, or at least hold the city behind loyal walls." At that, Littlefinger let out a breath of laughter. "Yes, yes, of course. Shall I gather the city's gold cloaks and put them into readiness? Perhaps you would prefer me to begin negotiations with Tywin, or with the Tyrells. There is so much that can be done behind the scenes to, shall we say, calm the waters." Ned hesitated. He did not like dealing with Littlefinger, but he also knew that Petyr Baelish held the city's purse strings and commanded influence among the watch and the merchants. "If you can keep the city from starving and keep the watch loyal, that would be a service to the realm. But do not scheme behind my back, Baelish. I will have no more treachery in King's Landing." "Oh, I wouldn't dream of it," Littlefinger said, a trace of mischief dancing in his eyes. Then he bowed low. "If you will excuse me, I must see to several urgent matters. The flow of coin is the life's blood of the city, and these revelations have thrown everything into chaos." Without waiting for a dismissal, he departed. Varys lingered a moment, "I wish you luck, Lord Stark," he said. "Truly I do. My little birds are restless. When they sing of the Lannisters' next moves, I shall let you know." He followed Littlefinger from the chamber, leaving Ned alone once more. Ned felt as if he carried a mountain upon his shoulders. Stannis Baratheon must be informed at once, and a raven sent to Dragonstone. He should also speak to Renly, who was in King's Landing. Renly had approached Ned once before, offering to help place Margaery Tyrell on the throne as Robert's queen if it meant displacing Cersei, but Ned had refused such a scheme. Now, a confrontation with Renly was inevitable. Renly might press his own claim, for he was charming and popular with some lords. Stannis was stern and unyielding, less likely to rally hearts, but the law was on his side. He rose to make for his desk, intending to begin drafting letters. He had to find a path through this labyrinth. As he stepped out of the chamber, he thought again of Robert's face, twisted in pain, his illusions shattered. Ned took no joy in that, but the truth was seldom gentle, and better a painful truth than a poisonous lie. In the throne room of the Red Keep, King Robert sat slumped upon the Iron Throne, though the hall was nearly empty. Usually, court was a place of ceremony, bustling with petitioners, guards, and lords. On this day, after the events at the Tourney, men and women had scattered to their corners, uncertain whether the king would lash out. The only ones remaining were the Kingsguard, Ser Barristan Selmy, Ser Meryn Trant, and Ser Boros Blunt stood watch, and several gold cloaks spaced about the cavernous room. Torchlight flickered against the metal swords that made up the throne of Aegon the Conqueror, giving it a dark gleam. Robert's face was haggard. He gripped a half-empty cup of wine, though for once he did not guzzle it. When Ned entered, the king did not move, except to shift his eyes up. "You've come, Ned," Robert said quietly, voice stripped of its usual boisterousness. "I thought you might after the tourney." Ned stepped forward, mindful of the path to the throne. He inclined his head. "Your Grace." Robert looked down at the cup in his hand, then let it fall. The wine spilled in a crimson streak across the floor. "What a joke I have been," he said bitterly. "All these years, I have lived in a fool's paradise. My children, my heirs, none of them were mine. The woman I called wife was bedding her brother in my own castle. The entire realm must be laughing at me, or pitying me." Ned felt a pang of sympathy. No matter how disastrous Robert's reign had been, no man deserved such betrayal. He chose his words carefully. "I am sorry, my friend. I would have spared you if I could." "Spare me?" Robert barked a harsh laugh. "I should have known. I should have seen it long ago. But every time I looked at that boy, I told myself it was just his mother's features. I was too content with the drinking and the whores and the hunts to care. Jon Arryn tried to warn me, but I didn't listen." He fell silent for a moment, then muttered, "How could I listen? I was too busy blaming him for meddling. I owe him everything, and now he's dead." Ned approached, halting several paces from the throne. "Jon Arryn uncovered the truth for you," he said gently. "He meant to protect you from the Lannisters. They feared his knowledge, and they silenced him." Robert ran a hand over his bearded jaw, eyes vacant. "I want them punished, Ned," he said in a low, dangerous tone. "I want them all to burn for this. Tywin, the Golden Twins, all of them. They murdered my friend, bedded each other under my roof, and built a lie around me." Ned bowed his head. "Justice must be done, Your Grace, but the realm is fragile. If we incite war..." Robert sat up straighter, a flash of his old fury igniting. "War? War is what they've earned, and war is what they shall have, unless Tywin Lannister bends the knee and yields the traitors into my hands. By the gods, I'll have the Kingslayer's head on a spike for this, and Cersei's too." The words rattled in the silent throne room. Ser Barristan Selmy did not flinch, but there was sorrow in his eyes. "Your Grace," said the old knight softly, "the laws of the land will demand a trial. Ser Jaime may claim trial by combat, and the Queen will have her own defenders. Shall that not be the way of it?" "Trial, yes," Robert snarled, though it sounded half-hearted. "I'll give them their trial. If the gods are good, the outcome is certain." He subsided slightly, pressing a hand to his temple. "I need to gather the lords loyal to me. Renly, he'll stand with me, will he not? And Stannis, once he hears. By the gods, I should name him heir, yes." Ned took a step closer. "Stannis is the rightful heir by all the laws of succession. And how do I call him back?" Robert asked bitterly. "He sits brooding on Dragonstone, no doubt cursing my name. He never liked this city. He never liked me much," Ned said quietly. "He is your brother, and he has served the realm faithfully. Once he receives word that Joffrey is not your son, he will act. Let me send a raven to him, commanding him to return. In the meantime, we must keep order here." Robert shut his eyes. Yes, do it. Write to him in my name, or I'll sign the letter if need be. Let him come and see what a farce my reign has become." Ned inclined his head. "We will restore order, your grace. The realm will see that you are still its king, that truth prevails. But it will not be simple. Tywin Lannister has an army. He will not take kindly to a slight against his family, let alone the imprisonment of his daughter and son." Robert's rage flared again. "Let him come. Let him march his lions to the gates. I'll smash them as I smashed Rhaegar Targaryen on the Trident. I still have enough men to defend my city." Ned bowed his head, not wishing to argue the point further. The king's thirst for vengeance might well bring them all to a war that dwarfed the rebellion. But it was too late for half measures. The realm had to brace itself for the Lannister wrath. For a moment, Robert's gaze rose to the vaulted ceiling, and he seemed to see a ghost of the man he once was. "Do you think she ever loved me, Ned?" he asked in a small, broken voice. "Even a little?" Ned felt sadness well up inside him. He knew that Robert's heart had always belonged to Lyanna Stark, Ned's sister, the woman Robert had lost to death. Cersei had known from the start she would never have Robert's love. Their marriage was a political arrangement. "I do not know, your grace," he said gently. Robert gave a bitter snort. "No, she never did. I was a fool." Then his jaw tightened. "Go, Ned. Send your raven to Stannis. Summon the lords loyal to me. The realm shall see I am still king." Ned bowed deeply and withdrew, his footsteps echoing in the emptiness. As he departed the throne room, his heart pounded with the magnitude of what lay ahead. He had cast the first stone. Now the war that might follow could drown the land in blood if peace was not quickly found. Even so, he believed he had acted rightly, and that was the only solace he carried. Honor often came with a high price, but Eddard Stark would pay it. Outside, in the castle yards, the aftermath of the revelation was visible everywhere. A heavier watch patrolled the walls. The Red Keep's gates were under strict guard. Rumors drifted through every corridor, each one more outlandish than the last. That Robert had slain Joffrey with his own hands, that Cersei had escaped into the city disguised as a washerwoman, that Tywin Lannister was already at the gates with 50,000 men, that House Tyrell was sending Mace Tyrell's armies to restore order that dragons had returned to claim the throne in truth. The city feasted on gossip, fueled by fear. Within the tower that housed the royal family's chambers, the gold cloaks guarded doors once watched by Lannister men-at-arms. Cersei was confined to a suite of rooms, not quite a cell, but neither free to wander. Joffrey was placed elsewhere, separated from his mother, under guard as well. Tommen and Myrcella had been moved to more comfortable quarters with a septa, as they were deemed less threatening, but still had watchers at the door. Jaime Lannister had been taken to the dungeons, stripped of his armor and sword, though the king had allowed him certain privileges in recognition of his Kingsguard station. He would be tried, so they said, for murder and treason and incest, though the details were unclear. The shock of it was still reverberating around the realm. The Kingslayer, once the realm's famed Golden Knight, now a prisoner accused of unspeakable crimes. Some who passed in the corridors cursed him or spat at him. Others simply stared in numb disbelief. A rare few whispered that House Lannister was not beaten, not by a long shot. Tywin was the real Lion of the West. His claws would come soon. In the Tower of the Hand, Ned sat at his desk with parchment before him, penning letters at a furious pace, each sealed with the direwolf of Stark and signed in the king's name as well as his own. Ravens would be sent across the 7 kingdoms, though some messages he would deliver in person to certain key lords who were in the city. He would gather the realm, or at least try. If the lords were wise, they would rally to Robert's side. Yet some might side with the Lannisters, seeing an advantage in supporting the old lion Tywin. Others might remain neutral, waiting to see which side prevailed. And what of the Tyrells in Highgarden, the Martells in Dorne, the Arryns in the Vale, or the Greyjoys on the Iron Islands? Each region had its complexities, and each might interpret the downfall of the Lannisters in a different way. Ned's head pounded, but he carried on. It was late in the evening when a messenger brought word that Lord Renly Baratheon had arrived at the Red Keep and was requesting an audience. Ned instructed them to show Renly in at once. He steeled himself as the king's youngest brother entered, flanked by a pair of his own men. Renly was tall, comely, and dressed in green and gold finery. He carried himself with an easy grace, but his expression was grave. "Lord Stark," Renly said as soon as the door closed. "I heard the rumors, but it scarcely seemed possible. Joffrey a bastard? The Queen and Jaime Lannister in your dungeons? Has the world gone mad?" Ned rose, setting his quill aside. "The truth is harsh, Lord Renly, but it is the truth." Renly shook his head slowly, a mixture of awe and uncertainty. "I confess, the boy never did look like my brother, but I never suspected this. Robert must be beside himself." Ned offered a weary nod. "He is. I cannot say I blame him, but we must move quickly. Tywin Lannister will not stand for this." Renly set his jaw. "My brother, the king, has always relied on others to do the difficult work. He's not the same man he once was, Eddard. He is drunk more often than not and rarely sees matters clearly. If the Lannisters march, I fear Robert will charge into battle without a plan, or worse, lash out at the city itself in a rage." Ned stiffened. He did not disagree. Robert's stability was questionable. "What do you propose, Lord Renly?" Renly eyed him keenly. "You should urge Robert to abdicate in favor of someone else, someone who can hold the realm together." Ned felt a burst of anger at the suggestion. "The king will not abdicate. That would be a further blow to the realm's stability. He is the rightful king, and the realm must see him as such. The Lannisters must face justice for their crimes." Renly's face hardened with frustration. "Justice, yes, but we must be practical. Robert is not the man to lead us through a war. He clings to the throne out of pride, but that pride may well destroy us. I can be a unifying force, Ned. I know the southern lords. I have good relations with the Tyrells. The people in the city like me." "You speak of usurping your own brother," Ned said coldly, though not raising his voice. "I will not take part in that. Robert is the king, and his rightful heir is Stannis." Renly let out a short laugh. "Stannis? The realm will not flock to his banners. He's cold, humorless, graceless. He might be Robert's elder brother, but he won't win hearts. If we want to avoid a bloodbath, we need a king the realm will accept readily. I am offering you an alternative, Ned." Ned's hand curled into a fist at his side. He recalled how Renly had once shown him a locket with Marjorie Tyrell's portrait, claiming she resembled Lyanna. He had been scheming even then to manipulate alliances. "I cannot do this, Lord Renly. My loyalty lies with Robert, and with the rightful line of succession. If you are thinking of seizing the throne, I must advise you not to try. It will only tear the kingdom apart further." Renly studied Ned for a moment, disappointment evident. "You are as stubborn as your reputation suggests," he said. "Very well. If you will not join me, then at least do not stand in my way when the time comes. Our realm deserves better than a drunken king and a furious Lannister patriarch. We need calm leadership." "That is what I am trying to provide," Ned retorted. "Calm, measured leadership by supporting the rightful king. If you truly love your brother and the realm, lend your strength to him now. Help him gather allies and prepare for what comes next. Do not speak of undermining him." Renly's lips pressed into a thin line. Very well. I suppose we shall see if Robert can be reasoned with. I will remain in King's Landing for a time, but do not blame me if I do what I must when the realm hangs in the balance. Do what you must, Ned said, though his voice shook with anger. But do not think you will find support for a coup here. Renly gave a short bow, not quite mocking but lacking true respect. Fare you well, Lord Stark, he said, and best of luck with your letters and ravens. You will need it. Then he turned and left. Ned sank back into his seat, breathing heavily, feeling the weight of the crown's politics pressing down. The war had not even begun in earnest, yet the fractures in House Baratheon were already evident. Robert on the throne, Stannis rightful heir, Renly seeking to carve a path to power. This was the family that had toppled the Targaryens, now riven by ambition and bitterness. He picked up his quill again and resumed writing to Stannis, detailing the events of the tourney, the revelation of the children's parentage, and the king's request for aid. He could only pray that Stannis would set aside any grudges and come to King's Landing to help stabilize the crown. Stannis was not beloved, but at least he was just and lawful. As Ned wrote, he heard the faint toll of distant bells, possibly from the great September of Baelor, rung to mark the dire occasion of conflict within the royal family. The city was in mourning for the illusions it had lost. Yet the realm would have to face the truth. Better that than live under a lie, Ned told himself again. Yet the cost of truth might be war, and war cost blood. His mind drifted to thoughts of his own family. His wife, Catelyn, was far to the north or at the Vale, guarding their son Bran at her sister's seat in the Eyrie, or perhaps on the road. He yearned for her counsel, her presence. Bran's fall, Arya's near miss with the Lannister guards in the streets, Sansa's heartbreak. He had tried to keep them safe, but in King's Landing, safety was an illusion. He dipped his quill in ink and pressed on, forging the final lines of the letter. I, Eddard Stark, Hand of the King, write this in the name of Robert Baratheon, first of his name, King of the Undulls and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm. By command of his grace, I do summon you to King's Landing to counsel and support him in these grave matters. The children of Queen Cersei Lannister are proven bastards, fathered not by the king but by her brother, Ser Jaime Lannister. The realm shudders on the brink of war. We implore you to return swiftly, Lord Stannis, for the good of the kingdom and for the sake of your brother's throne. Ned read the words back, then sealed the parchment with hot wax, pressing his signet ring into it. With that, he rose, intending to dispatch it immediately by Raven. Outside, the corridor flickered with torchlight. Stark guards escorted him to the rookery in the Maester's Tower. The city stirred below, torches in the streets revealing the unrest. He could almost hear the uneasy murmurs rising from Flea Bottom to the manors of the noble houses. The tide of events was unstoppable now. In the rookery, Maester Pycelle was conspicuously absent, likely skulking somewhere in confusion. Instead, a younger acolyte assisted Ned in attaching the letter to a raven's leg. The bird was loosed into the night sky, where it disappeared in a flutter of dark wings against the moonlit clouds. Ned lingered by the narrow window of the rookery for a moment, gazing over the city. Lights glimmered across the sprawling mass of King's Landing. The wind off the Blackwater Bay carried the tang of salt. He thought of Winterfell, the crisp northern air, the long summers of his youth. He remembered how he and Robert had both been young then, flush with the victory of Robert's rebellion. They had believed the realm's troubles were over. Now, decades later, he had upended the capital with a truth he could not keep hidden. Jon Arryn would have approved, Ned thought. Honor demanded it. But the cost, he feared that cost might be terrible indeed. He turned and made his way back toward his tower, step by step, weaving through the labyrinth of the keep. Guards saluted him. Passing servants bowed. All seemed to watch him with a mix of wonder and dread, as if to say, "You are the man who challenged the Queen and the Lannisters themselves." Ned wanted none of their awe. The city's gaze felt heavy on his shoulders. But it was done, and he must stand by his choice. Reaching his tower, he found that Sansa and Arya were asleep or at least confined to their rooms. Ned instructed the guards to keep watch through the night and to rouse him if there was any sign of disturbance. At last, exhausted, he entered his solar and removed his cloak, letting it slump on a chair. He moved to a small table and poured himself a cup of water, disdaining the wine that seemed to flow endlessly in this city. His mind would not quiet, so he stepped onto the balcony to look up at the stars. The sky was a vast black cloak embroidered with countless points of light. Yet all Ned could think was that somewhere out there, beyond the city walls, the Lannisters might already be gathering men. War horns might sound in Casterly Rock, in the Westerlands, in other corners of the realm. Tywin Lannister was not a man to be trifled with, and he had children in captivity now. The Targaryen dynasty had fallen to Robert's rebellion, and Ned prayed that House Stark would not fall to the Lannister vengeance. But if war came, he would do his duty, protecting the king and the realm as best he could. He closed his eyes and silently prayed to the old gods for guidance, for the safety of his family, and for the realm. The old gods gave no answer but the faint rustle of the night wind. Tomorrow he would see the king again, attempt to steady Robert's hand, and ensure that no further chaos erupted in the streets. The gold cloaks needed stronger leadership. The city's supplies needed to be secured. The list of tasks was endless, and every moment might bring fresh disaster. But Eddard Stark stood firm, as unyielding as the ancient weirwoods of the north. He had revealed the truth that had festered for so long, and the realm would either heal or be consumed by the fires of war. Let it never be said that he had turned away from his duty. Night wore on. King's Landing settled into a tense slumber. Tomorrow would bring new tidings, fresh battles of wits and steel, alliances forged in shadowy corners, and perhaps the first calls to arms. Yet Ned Stark's choice was made. The secret was out. Joffrey Baratheon was no true Baratheon at all. The boy's bastardy was known, and with that, the stakes of the game had risen to the highest pitch. So began the days after the Tourney of the Hand, a time that would shape the fate of the Seven Kingdoms. The drums of war had begun to beat, and no one could silence their thunder. But for one night, at least, Ned Stark allowed himself to rest, sword sheathed, heart heavy, and mind filled with the uncertain future. He had done what honor demanded. Whatever the outcome, he would face it as a Stark of Winterfell. Morning found King's Landing hushed under a strange pall. The usual shouts from the street vendors, the clang of distant smithies, the gregarious bark of fishmongers along the Blackwater seemed subdued, as if the entire city braced for a storm. In Flea Bottom, the poorest district, folk huddled together around shared fires, whispering about what they had seen and heard. The hand of the king accusing the queen of treason and her children of being bastards. Some repeated that King Robert had locked up Queen Cersei in the Red Keep's tower, along with her brother, Ser Jaime, once so proud in his gilded armor. No one knew precisely how it would end, but everyone felt the tremors of a coming quake. Within the Red Keep itself, tension weighed like a leaden cloak on all who walked its halls. Extra gold cloaks stood at nearly every archway, while certain halls were cordoned off with heavy iron stanchions, guarded by men in House Stark's colors. Maids scurried by with their eyes downcast, as if fearful of being accused of disloyalty. Courtiers and lesser lords who'd once floated around the queen like moths to a flame now hovered uncertainly, waiting to see which way the wind might blow. Some tried to find new favor with the hand. Others simply prayed that the city would not descend into riots if the Lannisters resisted. Eddard Stark woke from fitful sleep before dawn. He had dozed in a chair near the window in his solar, fully dressed save for his boots. When he'd closed his eyes, he'd still felt the crush of the day's events upon him. Robert's devastation, Cersei's fury, the wide eyes of Sansa as her betrothed was dragged off in chains. Even sleep had not relieved his mind of it. Now, as the gray light of morning seeped over the city, Ned rose, washed his face, and dressed anew in plain leathers and a doublet embroidered with the dire wolf sigil. He belted on his long sword, ice being far too large to wear in the halls, and stepped out into the corridor. 2 Stark guards fell in behind him at once. "See that my daughters break their fast," he told the first guard. "I will speak with them later." The guard bowed and went to do as commanded. By the time Ned arrived in the great hall of the Tower of the Hand, Maester Pycelle was there awaiting him, tottering on unsteady legs. Ned felt a flicker of annoyance. In his brief time in King's Landing, he had learned that the Grand Maester was not always as feeble or simple as he pretended. Pycelle's loyalty had leaned heavily toward the Lannisters for years. "My Lord Hand," Pycelle croaked, bowing stiffly. He clutched a scroll in one gnarled hand. "A raven came in the black of night, addressed to the king. I attempted to deliver it, but his grace was indisposed." Indisposed, Ned repeated, not hiding his frown. Even after all that had passed, Robert was drinking too much? Pycelle's mouth wobbled in a semblance of sympathy. Alas, he had taken quite a dose of wine and required the presence of 2 serving men merely to put him to bed. "I was told he commanded no one to wake him until midday, lest they risk his wrath. So I come to you, Lord Stark. You are the Hand. You speak with his authority." Ned took the scroll and broke the seal. The wax was plain, marked only by a crude impression of an eagle in flight, the seal of House Arryn. He recognized the style from the Vale, though not from Lisa Arryn specifically. Scanning the parchment, he saw the words, "To King Robert Baratheon, from the Lords Declarant of the Vale. Word has reached us of the accusations made against Her Grace, Queen Cersei Lannister, and of the arrests that followed. We fear for the stability of the realm in these dark times. We, loyal servants of the crown, stand uncertain as to the future. The Lady Regent of the Eyrie, Lisa Arryn, has retreated from the capital and expresses grave mistrust of the Queen. She desires to keep young Lord Robert Arryn safe from all threats and begs the King's justice upon the killers of her husband. We, the undersigned lords, entreat you to keep us informed of developments, that we might fulfill our oaths to protect the Vale and the realm. We stand ready to support the rightful king in bringing stability and justice." Below followed half a dozen signatures: Lord Royce, Lord Hunter, Lord Waynwood, and others. Ned nodded thoughtfully. "So the Vale is uneasy," he said, glancing up at Pycelle. "They want reassurance. They want to know whether they should gather armies or stand put." The Vale had mostly remained aloof after Jon Arryn's death. Lisa's flight from King's Landing had complicated matters. Pycelle made a show of stroking his white beard. "Indeed, my lord, the entire realm must now be uneasy. Rumors spread like wildfire, and even in the Vale, they will wonder whether the Iron Throne is secure." Ned folded the parchment and slipped it into his sleeve. "I'll speak with his grace as soon as he wakes. In the meantime, ready a reply to these lords. Tell them the king welcomes their loyalty and assures them that justice is being carried out. There is no cause to muster arms unless House Lannister moves first." Pycelle bowed. "As you will, Lord Hand." Ned hesitated, regarding the old man. "Maester Pycelle, have you visited the Queen's chambers since her confinement?" A flicker of discomfort crossed Pycelle's face. My lord, I have not. The king's men guard her doors. I was told that she is to have minimal visitors aside from her ladies. I did not wish to intrude, though I confess, in matters of health, any occupant of the Red Keep is under my care." Ned clasped his hands. "So far as I know, her grace is healthy enough. I suspect she does not wish any attention, and Robert has said nothing of letting you attend her. If that changes, you'll be informed." "Yes, Lord Hand." Pycelle bowed again, murmured a pious "The Mother watch over us all," and departed. Ned lingered in the hall a moment, thinking. Everything hinged on how the realm reacted. So far, no open fighting, no howling Lannister hordes at the gates. But that was certain to change. Tywin Lannister would not allow his daughter and son to remain captives for long. The question was whether he would treat with the king or come in arms. He wanted word from Riverrun as well, from Catelyn. It had been more than a fortnight since he'd last heard from his wife. She had remained in the Vale longer than intended because of the tension, but might now have gone to her father's seat. He prayed she was safe. The Stormlands, the Reach, the North, the Iron Islands, on and on. One spark, and all the 7 kingdoms could erupt like wildfire. With a weary sigh, Ned crossed the yard to the small courtyard that served as a training ground for the Stark Guards. He found Jory Castle's cousin, Fat Tom, and some of the men honing swords against wooden posts. Jory Himps. Elf had died in the fight against Jaime Lannister's men in the streets. Ned felt a pang of grief at the memory. He had no illusions that Jaime wouldn't be thirsting for revenge, locked away though he might be. Fat Tom noticed Ned and gave an awkward bow. "M'lord," he said, panting from exertion. "We've been doubling the watch as you asked. So far, no trouble. Less you count a few drunken gold cloaks in the Street of Silk last night. But that's hardly unusual." Ned nodded. "Good. Keep at it. I want eyes on the walls day and night. If Lannisters or anyone else approach the city in force, we can't be caught unawares." "Yes, M'lord." Before Ned could say more, he heard his name called across the yard. Turning, he saw Peter Baelish Littlefinger approaching. Baelish was dressed in fine, midnight blue silks, a mockingbird pin at his collar. He offered a small, ironic bow, ever too courteous to be genuine. "My Lord Hand, I trust you're well rested after that business at the Tourney?" Littlefinger said, his tone almost playful. "Not every day one sees a king's wife led away in chains by the king's own command." Ned gave him a level look. "We've had enough excitement to last the year. I fear more is coming." Littlefinger fell in beside Ned, strolling across the yard. "You'll be pleased to know I've made inquiries with the gold cloaks. They remain loyal for now. But loyalty in King's Landing is like a coin on a gambling table, easily lost when a higher bidder appears." Ned glanced sidelong at him. "Is that a threat or a warning?" "A warning, my lord. Never a threat. I do so look out for you. After all, if I wanted to stab you in the back, I'd have done so a dozen times already. But rest assured I prefer you alive. You keep the city from complete chaos, at least until the next stage." Ned's mouth tightened. "And what is the next stage, in your view?" "Why, war, perhaps." Littlefinger shrugged elegantly. "Unless the king finds a more imaginative solution. But Robert is not known for imagination, is he? He will demand Tywin bend the knee and deliver a ransom for his son and daughter's transgressions. Tywin will refuse, of course. Blood will be shed. The only question is how much." Ned slowed his steps, forcing Baelish to pause with him. "Are you prepared to do your part to keep the city safe if war does break out? You are master of coin, and you have connections within the city. I trust you'll use them to help quell riots, maintain supply lines, keep food coming in from the countryside. Without bread, the small folk will riot faster than Tywin can muster." Littlefinger brushed an invisible fleck of dust from his sleeve. "But of course, my lord, I shall do what I can. Just remember, every favor in King's Landing carries a cost. If I smooth over chaos in the harbor, or keep the merchant houses from panicking, I might come calling for a boon of my own. That's how the game is played." Ned felt a flash of anger rise in his chest. "Your game can damn the realm. We have a king to serve. I do what is needed to avoid needless bloodshed." Such a solemn view. Littlefinger's smile was cat-like. "We shall see if the realm can indeed be saved from bloodshed. In any case, I have pressing matters of finance to attend to, some tariffs to juggle, new coin to be minted if the war chest is short. I only wish to see if you'd heard from Tywin Lannister yet. A raven arrived at dawn, or so the rumor goes. But I gather it was from the Vale, not from Casterly Rock." "From the Vale," Ned confirmed, giving him little more. "If a raven arrives from Tywin, I'm certain the city will know soon enough." Littlefinger inclined his head, took a half-step back, and gave a mocking courtesy. "Fare you well, Lord Stark. I'll keep my ear to the ground. Watch your step." Ned watched him vanish into the corridor leading to the royal treasury. Then, with an inward sigh, he carried on. He had to see Robert. He found the king, as Pycelle had indicated, in his private solar near midday, flanked by 2 nervous serving men and a boy with a pitcher of water. The windows were thrown open to let in a breeze, but the stench of stale wine hung in the air. Robert was sprawled on a cushioned chair, face unshaven, eyes red. A table nearby bore half-eaten meat pies, lumps of old cheese, and an empty flagon. "Ser Barristan Selmy," upright and dignified in his white cloak, stood near the door, looking deeply uncomfortable. Robert glanced up blearily when Ned entered. "Gods, Ned, I can't look at you without remembering yesterday." He let out a ragged breath. "My children, I keep calling them that in my head, but they're not mine, are they? I took a stag to bed with a lioness and never noticed she was sharp-toothed. They were illusions, I'm sorry to say," Ned said quietly, "but illusions that would have drowned the realm in blood eventually. Yesterday you named the truth before all. You have taken the first step toward justice." Robert gave a short laugh, mirthless. "Justice? Is that what this is? All I've done is locked up my wife and her brother. Another might call it regicide in the making, or civil war, or the beginnings of a madness like King Ares. But no, He stopped and pressed the heel of his hand to his temple. "Gods, my head." Ned waved the serving boy away from the flagon of wine. "You've had too much drink, Your Grace. Try the water instead. I'd rather have a sword run through my belly, but fine, give it here." Robert seized the water pitcher, drank sloppily, and let some run down his chin. When he caught his breath, he said, "Any word from Tywin Lannister? Will the old lion submit or roar?" "No word yet," said Ned. "I suspect we'll hear soon enough, or perhaps we'll see his banners marching from the west. The man is proud and ruthless. He'll come with an army, I'd wager, and I'll need to rally my own lords. Renly's here, but Storm's End alone won't be enough. We need to muster the Crownlands, the Riverlands, the Vale. Damn it, I need to be a king, don't I?" He barked a bitter laugh again. "I can't even keep the wine from my mouth." "You are still the king, Robert," Ned said. "Summon your bannermen, yes, but do not rush into the field. Let Tywin make the first open move. Give him a chance to treat for Jaime's release or for Cersei's. Perhaps he will parley. If not, we'll be ready." Robert scowled. "Parley? Is that your counsel, Ned? I suppose you'd sooner find a way to avoid bloodshed. I know you, old friend. You never wanted this war. Well, neither did I, but it's here. I'll kill them if I must. All of them, Jaime, Cersei, any Lannister who stands in my path. They've made me a laughingstock." Ned's jaw tightened. It needn't come to that. They must answer for their treason, but a realm bathed in blood helps no one. He paused. "We can hold a formal trial for Cersei and Jaime, if you like, before the assembled court. The evidence will be overwhelming. That is justice. As for the children," Robert's stare grew haunted. "Myrcella, Tommen, gods, they are innocent in all this, aren't they? Those two might be sweet, but I see her face in them. Lannister gold in their hair, just like the boy, just like Joffrey." Ned chose his next words carefully. "By law, they have no claim to the throne. They are not your children by blood, yet they are children all the same. Show them mercy, Robert. Let them live." The king grunted. "Let them live. Yes, yes, let them live. It's not their doing. But what if in 20 years, Tommen or Myrcella tries to rally the West and make a claim? Even if I name Stannis as my heir, or if I manage to father a trueborn child on some new wife, who's to say these golden babes won't cause trouble? Is it not better to lock them away than to kill them?" Ned asked quietly. "You are not the mad king to slaughter innocents. The realm will respect a just man more than a butcher." Robert's big hand clenched around the arm of his chair, and for a moment, Ned feared he would argue further. But Robert only let out a weary sigh. I've enough blood on my hands from the rebellion. I'll not start murdering babes. Very well, they'll live under guard. I'll not let them roam free to scheme in their mother's name." Ned felt a measure of relief. "That is wise, Your Grace, and it will show the realm that you are not cruel. We need that now more than ever." Robert let his head slump back. "A fool on the throne, that's what I am. But no matter. Send the ravens. Gather my bannermen. Do all that a king's hand must do. I suppose I must make an appearance in the throne room soon. Let them see I'm still alive and not cowering." Ned nodded. "Better to show yourself strong. If the city sees your resolve, they'll be less likely to panic at rumors of Lannister retribution." Robert waved a hand. Yes, yes. One more thing. See to Joffrey. That boy, he has my name but not my blood. I can't look at him right now, but I'll not kill him either. He'll stand trial with Cersei and Jaime, if that's what must happen. Or do you think I should treat him differently? He's been cruel, that one, a bully, but he's still just a boy of 13. Ned hesitated, recalling Joffrey's sneers, his arrogance, his enjoyment of seeing Sansa's direwolf killed. He is old enough to bear some responsibility for his actions, but a public trial might stoke more chaos if we treat him as a mere criminal. The main charge is that he's not your heir, and that's proven. That is enough to strip him of any claim. His cruelty is another matter. Perhaps in time, we can find a place for him to live out his days far from the throne, far from power. Exile. Robert spat the word. Maybe the wall. Let the boy freeze among the Black brothers. That'd teach him a lesson in humility. Ned stiffened. The Night's Watch might not be pleased to have a Lannister bastard forced upon them, but it remains an option if he shows any sign of continued cruelty. For now, keep him under guard. Robert gave a grim nod. Yes, under guard. Out of my sight. Then he forced himself to stand, leaning a moment on the chair. By the gods, my head is pounding. But no matter. I'll go to the throne room soon. If you want to gather the small council, do it. Let them see the king's face. Then we'll talk about how to handle the West. Ned bowed. Of course, your grace. He paused. We might also invite the High Septon to speak. People look to their gods for guidance. A show of the faith support could help quell unrest. Robert grimaced. Fine, if you think it'll help. I care little for what that man in the Great September prattles on about. But if it calms the small folk, so be it. With that, Ned departed, Ser Barristan stepping aside to let him pass. The Lord Commander of the Kingsguard gave Ned a respectful nod and quietly said, You do the realm a service by cooling his fury, Lord Stark. Were it not for your influence, I fear Robert might have done something rash. Ned managed a thin smile. He is still your king. I only hope I can keep him from destroying himself. Barristan looked troubled, but only said, My sword is sworn to the crown. I pray it does not come to steel among our own people. They exchanged a grave nod and parted ways. Ned's next stop was the small council chamber, where he asked the guards to summon Varys, Peter Baelish, Renly Baratheon, and Maester Pycelle, though he expected Pycelle would lumber behind. He was not entirely sure if Renly would show, given the tensions of their last conversation, but he had to try. One by one, they trickled in. Lord Renly arrived first, clad in a crisp green tunic embroidered with golden stags. He wore a polite smile that did not reach his eyes. Lord Hand, he said in greeting, inclining his head, I assume you've decided how best to proceed with our family crisis? Ned said, The king wishes to gather his bannermen and have them on standby. War with the Lannisters may be unavoidable unless Tywin surprises us with peace overtures. He glanced at Renly. He needs you, Lord Renly. You are his brother and you have influence in the south. We must unite behind him. Renly arched an eyebrow. Yes, yes, you made your view clear enough before. Very well, I have no wish to see Tywin Lannister march in unopposed. Storm's End stands with Robert naturally. He brushed an invisible speck from his sleeve, then lowered his voice. I do worry, though. This realm can only handle so much strife. If Robert descends further into the drink, if he proves incapable, someone must pick up the slack. You understand, don't you? Ned's tone hardened. Robert is king. If he falters, I will do my best to guide him, to keep the realm from falling apart. That is my duty as Hand. I ask you, for the realm's sake, to do the same. Renly smiled politely, not denying his ambitions. I shall do my part. Varys entered next, gliding in with soft slippers. He wore voluminous lavender robes and carried a faint perfume that announced him a moment before he appeared. My Lord Hand, Lord Renly. Oh, what a serious gathering we have. Has the king joined us yet? In due time, Ned said. He'll come shortly. What have you heard of Tywin's movements? Varys pressed his fingertips together. Little birds bring rumors that Lord Tywin has left Casterly Rock, traveling to meet with certain bannermen. The scurrying in the Westerlands is quite intense. Soldiers are mustering. Whether this is a direct march on the Crownlands or a prelude to demands, I cannot say. I suspect we shall receive a raven soon. Baelish glided in just then, offering a half-smile. You see, Lord Stark, the cogs begin to turn. War is on everyone's lips. I do love a good spectacle, but it does ruin trade. The Master of Coin's burdens multiply if the roads aren't safe. Ned ignored the jibe and gestured to the table. Sit, all of you. We've a moment before the king arrives. Let's speak plainly. If Tywin Lannister marches east, we must be ready. The king will call his bannermen. I trust each of you to play your part in ensuring no chaos erupts in the city during these preparations. Renly settled into a seat, crossing one leg over the other. I can see to it that the Stormlords muster promptly. Tarth, Penrose, Estermont, Cairn. They'll come if I ask, though they've never loved King's Landing. Varys lowered himself gracefully onto a cushioned chair. I, of course, will do my best to keep the city calm. My whispers can quell certain fires before they rage out of control, so long as the king does not do anything publicly drastic. Littlefinger assumed his usual seat, flicking an imaginary speck of dust from the table. And I shall keep the coin flowing, see that the gold cloaks remain paid, and keep the markets from panic. If the people fear starvation, the riots will make Tywin's army look like a mild irritation by comparison. Ned nodded. Good, Maester Pycelle. He turned as the old man at last entered, grunting with the effort. You will handle official ravens for the king. Ensure the crown's calls for support are delivered swiftly to every corner of the realm. We want each lord to know the king's side of this story before the Lannisters spread their own version. Huff, yes, my lord Hand, Pycelle said, easing himself into a chair. It shall be done. I will personally see to each letter's authenticity. The great seal of the king will grace them all. Ned braced his hands on the table. Robert will be here shortly. Until then, let me be clear, we stand united behind the king. Whatever personal ambitions or grievances you have, keep them to yourselves. The realm needs stability now. He let that sink in, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. Peter Baelish's faint smirk suggested he would do as he wished, albeit with a veneer of compliance. Varys's smile was more inscrutable. Renly gave a casual, non-committal tilt of his head, while Pycelle nodded obsequiously. After a brief hush, the doors swung open, and King Robert strode in. Though he was freshly washed, he still looked tired, a faint shadow under his eyes betraying the previous night's excess. Yet he wore a thick doublet embroidered with the crowned stag of House Baratheon, and his posture was at least somewhat regal. Ser Barristan Selmy followed behind at a respectful distance. Robert glared around the table, then Saturday, well, let's get on with it. I have no patience for ceremony. Renly rose and bowed to greet him. Baelish and Varys inclined their heads. Pycelle tottered to his feet, murmuring, Your Grace, and then sank back again. Robert waved a hand for them to dispense with courtesies. Ned took his seat. Your Grace, the small council is assembled. We stand ready to carry out your will. Robert snorted. Good. My first will is that Tywin Lannister yield to me the traitors in his family or face my wrath. The Queen is my prisoner, and Jaime Lannister stands accused of treason and incest. But I'll not be satisfied until Tywin himself kneels. If he wants to talk, he must come to King's Landing and beg for the lives of his kin. The declaration hung in the air. Renly spoke carefully. Brother, that's a strong stance. It may well provoke Tywin to open war, especially if he sees no chance for a negotiated settlement. He's already taken every chance from me, Robert said, slamming a fist on the table. The wood rattled. He made a cuckold of me, one could argue. The realm will see that the Lannisters used me for their own ends. If he wants war, let it be on his head. Ned placed a calming hand on the table. Your Grace, let us phrase this carefully in our letters. We can demand that Lord Tywin come to the capital, swear his fealty again, and relinquish any claim the queen or her children might have. Let it not sound like an ultimatum for his head on a pike. That way, if he wants to avoid war, he has a path. Robert eyed Ned, then nodded grudgingly. Fine. Word it how you like, as long as it's clear he's the one who must kneel. Tywin's pride is half his backbone, so maybe that alone will force him to negotiate. Or maybe he'll come with swords drawn. Ned glanced at Baelish. Lord Baelish, see that the gold cloaks remain loyal. We'll need them to defend the city if Tywin comes in force. Also, prepare the crown's finances for provisioning extra men. Robert will be calling banners from the crownlands. Baelish steepled his fingers. I'll do so, though if we are truly facing a large-scale war, the crown's debt will balloon to new heights. The Iron Bank of Bravos will not be pleased. Robert let out a loud scoff. Let them whine, damn it. I'll pay them when I've crushed the Lannisters and seized their gold mines. Ha! Then the crown's debt will vanish. Varys cleared his throat. Your Grace, if I may be so bold. The city's small folk fear a siege if the Lannisters march. Perhaps you could make a public address to reassure them that the city will not starve and that you will keep them safe. A public address? Robert gave a dismissive wave. You want me to stand on the castle walls and shout? I'm no mummer, but fine. If it'll keep them from rioting, I'll do something of the sort. Bring them to the courtyard. I'll roar a few words of comfort. Varys bowed his head graciously. Your presence alone will comfort many, Your Grace. Renly leaned forward. Brother, I can ride out to Storm's End to rally our bannermen if you wish. Or I can remain here in the city to show solidarity. Which do you prefer? Robert considered. Go gather the Storm Lords. I trust you can handle them. Bring them near enough to the city that if Tywin marches, they can join our main host. But don't come crashing in unless I call. The roads must remain open for trade. Renly inclined his head. As you command. Ned suppress. At a flicker of relief. It would remove a potential agitator from the capital, and that might help avoid trouble. Ser Barristan, I trust you to oversee the Kingsguard. The White Cloaks must stand ready to defend the king if any attempt is made on his life. Barristan nodded stiffly from his spot by the door. We shall not fail him, my lord. Robert grunted. Now that we've settled that, unless there's more to discuss, I'd have some quiet. You lot know your duties. Ned slowly rose, letting the others do the same. Pycelle began muttering about letters. Varys gave a flowery bow, and Baelish offered a sly smile as he followed them out. Renly remained behind a moment to exchange quiet words with Robert, but Ned left them to it. He and Barristan were the last to exit, and the king's bellowed voice drifted after them, cursing the day and demanding more water. At least it wasn't wine. In the corridor, Varys touched Ned's sleeve gently. Lord Stark, a word, if you please? Ned nodded to Barristan, who continued on, and turned aside with the eunuch. What is it? I fear that, in the dungeons, Ser Jaime Lannister grows restless. Varys's voice was pitched low. He has demanded a trial by combat, or so my little birds report. There's some confusion among the jailers as to whether such a request should be granted. Ned felt his jaw tighten. Trial by combat had deep roots in the traditions of Westeros. Even a man clearly guilty of crimes could demand the gods judge him in single combat. If Jaime demanded it, and the king allowed it, who would stand as the crown's champion? Jaime was formidable, quite possibly the best swordsman in the realm. I suspect Robert would relish the chance to face him, Ned said carefully. But that would be too dangerous. If Jaime slew the king, we'd have catastrophe. If the king slew Jaime, Tywin would claim Robert murdered him outside a fair trial. Varys nodded sympathetically. Tricky. Ser Jaime might propose that another champion fight in his stead. Someone from the Kingsguard loyal to him, or perhaps he'd name the mountain if he were free. But the mountain's not here in the city, last I heard. Ned let out a breath. The king would not allow Gregor Clegane to fight for Jaime, I suspect. That man is a monster. More importantly, we do not want to encourage bloodshed in the yard. If there must be a trial, let it be a proper hearing. Varys's eyes twinkled with a certain sorrow. Ser Jaime's request is lawful, though. If the king denies him a trial by combat, some lords will call it injustice. If the king allows it and sets a champion, that champion must be quite skilled to face the Kingslayer with any hope of victory. Ned's mind flicked to men who might stand as champion. Loras Tyrell was famed for his jousting, but was he a match for Jaime in single combat with live steel? Bronn was cunning but a sellsword, not necessarily loyal to the crown. Barristan Selmy was older, but still formidable. Perhaps he was the best living knight to face Jaime. Yet Ned did not wish to see Barristan's life risked unnecessarily. Bring this news to me in official form, Ned decided. We'll raise it with the king, but I have little doubt Robert will want Jaime's guilt proven in the eyes of the realm. A trial by combat might not give us that clarity. Regardless, we'll address it soon. Varys bowed. As you say, my lord Hand, the seeds of war sprout in all corners. Do they not? I pray we find a peaceful harvest. With that, the eunuch slipped away, silent as a cat. Ned stood a moment, breathing deeply. The day's troubles multiplied. Tywin's likely approach, the uncertain loyalty of the City Watch, Renly's ambitions, Jaime's demands for trial by combat, and the potential for chaos if the king's next public words were spoken in drunken rage. Yet he clung to the conviction that honesty and justice must prevail. They had to, or the realm would drown in lies and slaughter. He resolved to check on his daughters. Sansa and Arya were in their shared chambers, under the watchful eye of Septa Mordane. The Septa opened the door with a scowl, as if expecting more trouble. Inside, Sansa sat at a small table, staring into a mirror. Arya was perched on the window seat, one leg bouncing anxiously. Upon seeing Ned, both girls stood. Sansa, Arya, he said gently, stepping forward. Are you both well? Arya was the first to speak. We're stuck in here all day while outside it's like a battle brewing. It's not fair, father. Ned offered a faint smile. I'm sorry, Arya. There is danger in the city, and I cannot risk you wandering about. Please understand. She folded her arms stubbornly. I can take care of myself. Syrio says I'm improving with the sword every day. Even so, Ned said, you are my daughter and I will keep you safe. He turned to Sansa, who had tears brimming in her eyes again. How do you fare, my sweet? Sansa wiped at her cheeks. Joffrey, he's in the dungeons, isn't he? I heard men talking outside the door. She looked at her father with an expression of mingled betrayal and heartbreak. He was supposed to be my prince, my future husband. Was it all a lie? Ned's heart clenched. He thought of how he had once promised Sansa she would wed a king's son. I'm sorry, Sansa. I never wished for you to be hurt. But Joffrey was not who he claimed to be. He is not truly Robert's son, and he has done many cruel things. Sansa's voice trembled. I know. He lied about the dire wolf. About everything. He can be so awful. But still, she looked down. I feel like a fool. Ned placed a hand on her shoulder. You are not a fool. You wanted to see the best in him, that's all. Now you must learn from this. Life at court can be cruel. People wear masks. Arya snorted. Masks of gold. Ha! She looked at her sister. At least now you know he's a toad. Arya, Ned said softly, though he couldn't entirely rebuke the sentiment. Sansa's tears spilled again, but she nodded. What will happen to him? Will he be executed? Ned shook his head. I do not think so. The king does not wish to slay the children, but there will be trials. Once that's resolved, Joffrey may be sent away from King's Landing. Sansa swallowed hard. Good, she whispered, though her trembling lips revealed she was still torn. He deserves to be far away. Ned kissed her forehead, then turned to Arya. Have you continued your lessons with Syrio Farrell? She brightened slightly. Yes, father, in the mornings. He is teaching me the water dance. I want to be quick, like him. Good, Ned said. But be wary. I don't want you leaving the Red Keep without a guard. Not even with Syrio. We cannot trust the city right now. Arya nodded grudgingly. All right, but if a Lannister comes to kill me, I'll fight back. That you will, Ned said, a hint of pride and worry in his voice. For now, stay here. I'll see to it that you have the run of the keep's interior if you must stretch your legs, but no going beyond the gates. The gold cloaks will be told to let you pass if you're accompanied. Sansa gave a timid smile. Thank you, father. Septa Mordain stood with hands folded, her stern gaze drifting between them. It is good to see you, Lord Stark. The girls have had many questions. I've done my best to reassure them, but the city brims with dreadful rumors. Thank you, Septa. Please continue to watch over them, Ned said. I will come again soon. He left them with a heavier heart, but at least his daughters were relatively safe. If war erupted, though nowhere in King's Landing would be truly secure, perhaps he thought he should send them away for their own protection. But he did not want to separate the family further, and Robert might see it as a slight or lack of faith. For now, they would remain. Returning to the corridor, Ned found that a messenger was waiting. A gold cloak bearing a rolled parchment with the sigil of House Baratheon pressed into red wax. My Lord Hand, a message from His Grace. He's in the throne room, the man said. Ned opened it. The scrawl was short. We will address the court. Come at once. Bring the small council. Make sure the lords present in King's Landing attend. It seemed Robert planned to make that public showing right away. Ned sighed. Gather the small council if they're still in the keep, he told the messenger, and ensure all high lords currently here are invited to the throne room. Let it be known the king has a proclamation. I'll attend immediately. The throne room of the Red Keep was a sweeping space of vaulted ceilings and massive pillars. High, narrow windows let in angled beams of afternoon light, catching motes of dust in the air. Rows of guards lined the walls, wearing the gold cloaks of the City Watch or the armor of House Stark. At the far end, the Iron Throne rose up in all its forbidding glory, a twisted mass of black and silver metal, hammered from the swords of Aegon's conquered foes. Robert Baratheon sat upon it, wearing a gold crown heavy with rubies. His posture was more upright than in private, but Ned could see tension in the set of his shoulders. Below, in a half-circle, stood the lords and knights who had remained in King's Landing or who had hurried to the Red Keep upon hearing the summons. Among them Ned noticed Lord Giles Rosby, Lord Stokeworth, several knights from the Crownlands, and lesser notables with minor sigils. On the dais, off to one side, Baelish and Varys had taken positions, while Pycelle hovered with a page holding his chain of office. Ser Barristan Selmy and two other Kingsguard knights stood to either side of Robert. The doors creaked open again to admit Lord Renly, who slipped in behind some others, arms folded. Far in the back, Tyrion Lannister stood on his toes for a better view. Ned had heard that Tyrion returned to the city last night, no doubt as alarmed as anyone about his siblings' plight. Ned wondered what role Tyrion might play in this conflict, given that he was still a Lannister, yet not as close to Cersei as Jaime was. When Ned reached the foot of the throne, he bowed. Robert beckoned him to stand at his right hand. Then the king cleared his throat and glowered out at the crowd. Hear me. Robert's voice boomed. I, Robert of the House Baratheon, first of my name, king of the Undulls and the First Men, lord of the Seven Kingdoms and protector of the realm, do hereby proclaim the following. The royal children, Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen, born of Cersei Lannister, are not of my blood, but the fruit of treason and incest with her brother, Ser Jaime Lannister. This abomination shall not stand. A gasp rippled through the assembly, as if many had not fully believed the rumors. Then a rising murmur followed, some crying out in shock, others in condemnation or confusion. Tyrion Lannister's face was stony. Lord Renly's expression was carefully neutral. A few at the edges of the throne room started to step back, as though wanting to flee. Robert raised a hand to silence them. Cersei Lannister and Jaime Lannister are under arrest. They shall be tried for treason, murder, and incest. My supposed heir, Joffrey, is no true Baratheon, and shall never sit the Iron Throne. Any lord who questions this can face me now. His last words came out in a snarl. No one stepped forward. Fear or a grim acceptance held them in place. Robert spat. Good. Let the realm hear it loud and clear. Furthermore, I call upon Lord Tywin Lannister to come to King's Landing and bend the knee. If he refuses, if he dares raise an army against me, I will meet him in battle and show him no mercy. The lion has torn my house from within, and I will have recompense in blood or submission." This time the murmuring was louder, a wave of alarm passing through the throng. Robert's threat was overt. Ned could almost hear the scribbling of mental calculations in every lord's mind. Would Tywin yield? Or was war certain? Robert pressed on, shifting in the throne. To the lords of the Crownlands, the Vale, the Stormlands, the Reach, the North, the Riverlands, the Iron Islands, and Dorne, I command you to uphold your oaths of fealty. Stand with me against this treachery. If Tywin Lannister comes in peace, let him. If not, we shall bring him to heel." He paused, turning his gaze to Ned. Ned offered a small nod in support, and Robert took a deep breath. "That is all I have to say. Pray to whatever gods you wish that Tywin sees sense. Now go, spread the word. If war must come, we shall be ready." The official pronouncement done, Robert lifted a hand, dismissing the assemblage. The rush of voices turned into a chaotic swell, lords tripping over each other in haste to depart. Some might hurry to dispatch their own ravens, others to align themselves with House Baratheon more firmly. A few parted to give Tyrion Lannister a wide berth, as if his very presence might draw the king's wrath. Tyrion looked quietly furious, though he kept his mouth shut for now. Ned stepped down from the dais as the hall cleared, catching a glimpse of Tyrion slipping out a side door, no doubt to ponder how to save his family. Renly was speaking with a handful of Stormlords, gesturing emphatically. Varys was near one of the pillars, murmuring to a gold cloak. Baelish had already vanished, likely to manage the city's finances or spread his own brand of chaos. Moments later, as the crowd thinned, Ned felt a tug on his sleeve. He turned to see Tyrion Lannister, shorter than him by a foot, blinking up with mismatched eyes, one green, one black. "Lord Stark," Tyrion said in a low voice, "you've been quite busy, I see. My dear sister and brother in chains. The king roaring for my father's head. I must congratulate you. Rarely does one topple so many Lannister pieces in a single stroke." Ned studied him warily. "I only revealed the truth. Your family's crimes demanded redress." Tyrion's mouth twitched in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Crimes indeed. I don't dispute that Cersei and Jaime overreached, but I do find it vexing that the entire House Lannister is now tarred with the same brush. My father has a nasty temper, as you surely know. If Tywin chooses war, the blood will be on his hands," Ned said. "If he yields, the king has left a path open for him to come in peace." Tyrion let out a short, humorless laugh. "My father does not bend easily, my lord. I fear he'll see this as an insult too grave to ignore. But that's not your immediate concern, is it? You must hold the city. I only hope you realize just how dangerous it is to have the queen locked up. She's cunning, resourceful. If you underestimate her, she'll slip the leash." Ned's eyes hardened. "She is guarded night and day," Tyrion shrugged. "And gold can buy guards or fear can sway them. Have a care. Not all men in King's Landing share your sense of honor. I am well aware of that, Lannister. Still, if you think your father can be persuaded to avoid bloodshed, speak to him." Tyrion half-turned, resting his weight on one foot. "I plan to, unless the king decides to throw me in the dungeon as well, for having the misfortune of being born a Lannister. So far, it seems I'm free to move about, but that could change with a snap of Robert's fingers. Yes," Ned measured his tone. "I have no cause to arrest you. You have not openly betrayed the crown, nor have you participated in your siblings' incest." Tyrion's lips twisted wryly. "Thank you for that sterling endorsement." He paused, looking Ned in the eye. "Let me say this, Lord Stark. I have no wish to see my family destroyed, but neither do I want the realm drowned in war. If a chance arises to broker peace, I'll do my utmost to secure it. My father is not easily swayed, but I'm not without influence." Ned nodded, uncertain whether to believe him. Peace is the best path, if it can be found. I won't turn it away. Tyrion performed a mocking bow. Then we are allies of convenience, if not in name. Good day, Lord Stark. He left in a swirl of cloak, weaving adeptly through the departing nobles. Ned watched him go, thinking that Tyrion Lannister might be the only one in that family who had no direct guilt in Joffrey's parentage or Jon Arryn's murder. Yet Tyrion was still a lion at heart, cunning and proud. Ned resolved not to trust him too far. Soon the throne room was nearly empty. Robert had left through a side entrance, heading for his chambers. Renly had gone as well, presumably to gather his retinue for the trip to Storm's End. Ned departed, heart heavy with the knowledge that war was now more than a distant threat. Robert's public challenge to Tywin had placed them on a collision course. By the time twilight fell, Ned's entire body felt weighted by exhaustion. He had spent hours in the Tower of the Hand, overseeing the dispatch of letters across the realm, orders for loyal bannermen to muster, calls for calm to the city, and personal messages to certain lords in the Riverlands and the Vale whose support might be crucial. Maester Pycelle's novices hurried to and fro, sealing and sending ravens by the dozens. Scrolls stacked up on Ned's desk, and his quill ran dry twice. Each time he refilled it and pressed on. Outside the windows, the setting sun bathed King's Landing in a bloody light, as if foretelling the violence to come. Ned rose from his chair at last, rolling his stiff shoulders. He needed a breath of air. Stepping onto a narrow balcony, he gazed down at the sprawling city. Boats dotted the Blackwater Rush, sails furled for the evening. The distant chatter of the streets reached his ears as a muted hum. He closed his eyes and inhaled. The tang of salt air mingled with the stench of the city. Pigs, tanners, latrines. It was a far cry from the crisp breezes of the north. Yet he forced himself to center his thoughts. The die was cast. He had revealed the secret, undone the false heirs. Now he had to see the realm through the consequences. Soft footsteps approached behind him. He turned to see Arya. She must have slipped past the guards. Arya? You shouldn't be out alone. She shrugged. I was careful. Father, I'm tired of being cooped up. I want to train with Syrio, but even he says I must be careful in the halls. She bit her lip, then said, Is it true we're going to fight the Lannisters? Ned looked at her solemnly. We might. If Lord Tywin does not bend, there will be battle. But that's not for you to worry about. She bristled. I'm not a baby. I want to help. He rested a hand on her shoulder. The best help you can give me is to stay safe. But I promise, when this is over, we will return to Winterfell, where you can run free in the castle yards without fear. Her gray eyes lit up. Winterfell? She repeated softly, as if it were a dream. I miss it. So do I, Ned admitted, smiling. Now, back to your chambers or to the library if you'd rather read. Just keep Ser Boros or one of our own men with you. Will you do that for me? Arya frowned, but nodded. All right, but if the Lannisters come, I'll fight. He gave her a gentle push. Go on, brave one. She hurried off, quiet as a mouse. Ned sighed. War and children were bitter neighbors, but that was the truth of life in Westeros. He returned to his desk, scanning the final letter he had drafted. One to Stannis Baratheon. He had sent an earlier raven, but this was more explicit, calling on Stannis to muster his fleets at Dragonstone and Storm's End, to be ready to sail to King's Landing if Tywin marched. That letter would go out tonight. He rolled it, sealed it, and handed it off to an acolyte with instructions to see it sent at once. After that, he allowed himself to leave the tower for a brief walk along the castle ramparts, accompanied by 4 Stark guard. Dusk painted the city in deep purples, the last rays of the sun glinting off the gilded spires of the Great September of Baelor. From the battlements, he could see how vulnerable the city was if a large army arrived. The walls were high, but the population within was immense. Provisions were not enough for a long siege, especially if the roads in were cut. Tywin could starve them out, unless the king chose to ride forth and meet him on the field. That, in turn, might risk open battle that could devastate the crown's forces if the west was fully marshaled. So many dire possibilities. Ned clenched his fists. He had to trust that the other great houses would stand with the king. The North would, once word reached Robb and Catelyn, though Robb was still quite young. The Riverlands, led by Lord Hoster Tully, might help if appealed to. The Vale was uncertain under Lysa's shaky leadership. The Reach and Dorne were wild cards. Yet historically, few had loved the Lannisters enough to side with them if a crime so vile was proven in front of the realm. He prayed the realm's sense of justice would overpower its appetite for advantage. But power, gold, and fear could sway many. Night came on fully, and Ned found himself in the Godswood of the Red Keep, a small enclosure of tangled trees and a single weirwood that was younger than those in the north. It had no face carved on it, for the southern lords seldom followed the old gods. Even so, Ned knelt at its base and closed his eyes. He recalled the quiet hush of the Godswood at Winterfell, the voice of the wind through ancient leaves. Here, the city's noise never quite faded, but he let his mind slip away from the clamor. He prayed for strength, for guidance, for the safety of his family, and for peace to somehow settle over the land. But in his heart, he felt the same stirring dread that had haunted him since the moment he had confronted Cersei in the Godswood weeks ago. She had told him, "When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. There is no middle ground." Ned had chosen to stand for truth, and now they were all in the jaws of war. Rising, he saw the stars overhead, bright pinpricks in a black velvet sky. He thought of the lone star that had led his sister Lyanna to her grave, the promise he had made her as she died. Promises had defined his life. Now he made one more, that he would see this realm set right or die trying. For days passed in a tense lull. The city braced for news of Tywin's response. Robert grew increasingly restless, pacing the halls, muttering about riding out to hunt boars just to break the monotony. Ned convinced him to remain, reminding him that a king's presence was vital to keep the people calm. Meanwhile, ravens flew out and came in daily, carrying word of lords stirring to muster. The Crownlands were responding, as were many of the Storm Lords. The Vale Lords, uncertain of their Lady Regent's stance, still pledged men to the king's cause in memory of Jon Arryn. The north was far, and none expected an immediate force from Winterfell, but word was sent regardless. On the 5th day, a raven arrived from Casterly Rock, bearing Tywin Lannister's seal, a roaring lion in gold wax. Ned and Robert read the letter in a private audience, with only Ser Barristan present. Tywin's message was short and cool, to the usurper styling himself king of the 7 kingdoms. "You claim to sit the Iron Throne by right of conquest and popular acclaim. You imprison my children on false charges. You slander the name of Lannister to justify your own failings and humiliations. I will not come to King's Landing like a beggar to bend the knee. If you wish a parley, you will come west to Harrenhal, which I will hold as neutral ground. Should you choose not to parley, I will march. Let the realm judge which side the gods favor." He signed it as Tywin of House Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock, Shield of Lannisport, Warden of the West. Ned felt the hairs on the back of his neck prickle as he read the lines. Tywin all but declared that he would not kneel, and that if Robert refused to meet him, war was inevitable. Robert slammed the parchment onto a table. "The gall of that old bastard," he snarled. "He demands that I, the king, come to him?" Ned said grimly. He named Harrenhal as neutral ground. Perhaps he thinks the Riverlands are in no position to deny him. But truly, Harrenhal belongs to Peter Baelish, or at least Baelish was granted the lordship, though it's largely in ruins. Either way, Tywin is implying he can hold it by force if need be. "Of course he can," Robert spat. "Harrenhal is near the Trident. He can gather his armies from the Westerlands, march through the Riverlands. The Tullys might protest, but if Edmure Tully or Lord Hoster are wise, they won't let Tywin just walk in unopposed. Still, the Riverlands have enough troubles with bandits and the likes of the Mountain. Perhaps they can't muster quickly. Tywin's cunning." Ned studied the letter again. "We cannot let him call the shots, Your Grace. If we scurry to Harrenhal at his command, it looks like we are bending to his will. But if we refuse outright, that might be all the pretext he needs to wage open war. So the question is, do we meet him, or do we prepare for battle? Robert let out a breath, staring at the letter as though it were a snake. If there was any chance of peace, it would require that old lion to release Jaime and Cersei from blame and let me name their punishment. He'll never agree. Even so, maybe we could meet under some banner of truce. But how could I trust him not to set a trap? Ned recalled the words Tywin had written. Let the realm judge which side the gods favor. Tywin might try to spin the meeting into a display that Robert was weak or uncertain. A single stroke at Harrenhal could see you captured or worse, Ned warned. We would need massive security and the Tullis guarantee of a safe passage. Even then, it's risky. Robert paced. I might go with half my force, camp outside Harrenhal, and let Tywin come into the fortress if he dares. But that's a large gamble. Or I could ignore him, muster the entire realm, and dare him to cross the Trident. If he does, it's war. Ned said quietly, war might be what he wants. Yet do we not owe it to the realm to try once for peace? Cersei and Jaime's guilt is beyond doubt, but perhaps Tywin will accept some compromise that spares thousands of lives. Compromise? Robert barked a bitter laugh. You want me to let them slip away unpunished? Can't, Ned. I won't. Not unpunished, Ned allowed. But if Tywin offered a massive indemnity, gold enough to fill the crown's coffers for years, would that not do more good than a pitched battle? We can still insist on Jaime answering for his crimes, and Cersei as well. Robert's look was dark. You think Tywin would hand me Jaime to be executed or locked away? Never. He'd sooner burn the whole realm. Unless Jaime rots in a cage, Tywin will not yield. But if I let Jaime go, I'd look weak and dishonored. So there's no meeting in the middle. Ned pressed his lips together, thinking of all the men who would die. It seems so, but we must still attempt some parley. If war is truly inevitable, best we gather as many allies as we can before we meet him. Robert flung himself into a chair, reading the letter again. Harrenhal, damn that ruin. Full of curses, they say. Fine. If the old lion wants me to come there, I'll answer in kind. Let him present himself at Riverrun, seat of House Tully. That's neutral enough and a lot safer for me. If he refuses that, the blame for the war is on him. Write to him, Ned. Ned nodded. I will. We'll see if he accepts. If not, we muster and prepare for battle on the Trident. I will send a raven to Hoster Tully as well, to let him know your intentions. Robert looked away, jaw clenched. Yes, do it. Gods, I'm tired of this. The realm bleeds, Ned, and it hasn't even started. All because of a lying woman and her brother. Ned said nothing. He took the parchment and left. The lines of fate were drawn. The best chance to avert a massive conflict now lay in letters that might well be rejected. War, once begun, would not easily be contained. Cersei Lannister's confinement, meanwhile, had not softened her. In her tower rooms, she raged at any guard who entered, threatened them with dire vengeance once her father arrived. She refused to see Pycelle or any septas. Rumor said that she threw plates at the walls until her ladies stripped the chamber of anything not nailed down. Joffrey was similarly defiant, bellowing that he was the rightful heir, that he'd have every Stark's head once he was free. Tommen and Myrcella cowered in confusion, uncertain why their mother wouldn't see them, or why men with wolves on their sigils glowered at them in the corridors. Ned tried to ensure they were well fed and cared for, but it was an unhappy captivity. Jaime remained in the dungeons. Twice he had demanded an audience with the king or the hand. Ned refused him each time. The king likewise had no desire to hear the Kingslayer's boasts. Varys reported that Jaime spent hours pacing his cell and practicing sword forms with a wooden stick. The jailers were careful to give him minimal comforts, though Robert did permit him decent food and wine in recognition of his standing. But no visitors besides a silent septon who offered confession. Jaime turned him away each time. On the 7th day after Robert's public decree, everything changed again. Ned was reviewing a final draft of the letter to Tywin, wherein Robert proposed Riverrun as the meeting place. It had taken some time to confirm the Tullus' willingness to host. A messenger arrived from the main gates of the Red Keep, breathless. "Lord Hand," he gasped. Horsemen from the west approached the city, banners with the Golden Lion, their flying white flags, requesting entry for envoys. "The gold cloaks want your leave to open the gates." Ned stood so abruptly that his chair scraped on the floor. Tywin's men? Already? They must have ridden hard. White flags means a parley, or at least a delegation. He felt a swirl of apprehension. Where is the king? Out in the courtyard, M-Lord, gathering men. Ser Barristan is with him. They await your word. Ned nodded curtly, then strode out. The yard was a flurry of motion. Gold cloaks and Stark guards arming themselves, suspicious of any Lannister trick. Robert stood near his warhorse, a massive black stallion, already in partial armor, sweating in the midday sun. When Robert saw Ned, he barked, "They're at the city gates. They say they come in peace to treat. I'll meet them on the field if I must." Ned wiped sweat from his brow. "We should let them enter under close guard. No sense spurning a peace delegation. But we must be wary." Robert grunted. "Ser Barristan suggests we meet them outside the gate with a strong escort. That way, if they try anything, we kill them. Or if they are truly envoys, we can escort them inside the city properly." Ned nodded. "A wise approach. Let's do it." A short while later, Ned and Robert rode out the gate with a force of 100 men. Gold cloaks, Stark guards, some of Renly's knights who had not yet departed, and Ser Barristan in shining white armor. The noon sun beat down fiercely. Outside the city walls, a group of perhaps 20 riders waited, banners of gold lions on crimson fields drooping in the still air. Leading them was a man in ornate plate and mail, his visor up, revealing a stern face with a close-cropped gray beard. He carried no sword in hand, resting it sheathed at his side. Behind him were knights similarly armed but flying flags of truce. Ned recognized the man as Ser Kevan Lannister, Tywin's brother, and Jaime and Cersei's uncle. Kevan was known to be loyal to Tywin but less prone to arrogance than the rest. Robert cantered forward, Ned by his side. They halted a short distance away. Robert's voice thundered in the stillness. "You come under a white flag. State your purpose." Kevan raised his hand in a respectful gesture. "Your Grace, I am Ser Kevan Lannister, brother to Lord Tywin. I come bearing a message from my lord brother, and to parley if you will grant me safe conduct." Robert's eyes narrowed. "You travel with armed knights. How is that safe conduct for me?" Kevan inclined his head. "Merely my escort, your Grace. If you wish, only I will enter the city. My men will remain outside. We come in peace on my honor." Ned glanced around warily. The farmland outside the walls offered no cover for a hidden army. It appeared only these riders had come. Perhaps the Lannisters wished to avoid a direct confrontation while negotiations were possible. Robert weighed the moment, then said, "Very well. You and 5 of your men may enter under my protection. The rest will remain here under watch. If you attempt any treachery, you'll die." "Understood." Kevan nodded solemnly. "I understand, your Grace. I accept." Robert gestured to Ser Barristan, who signaled a portion of the gold cloaks to surround the Lannisters who would remain. Kevan chose 5 knights to ride with him, each lowering their weapons. Ned felt the tension in the air as the group rode toward the gate, accompanied by Robert, Ned, and their escort. Along the way, peasants gathering in the field paused to stare at the armed column, whispering fearfully. Soldiers on the walls watched from above, ready with crossbows if needed. They passed into King's Landing, the gates rattling shut behind them. The city crowds parted in a mixture of awe and anger. Lannister envoys were not welcome. Some onlookers shouted curses or threw rotten vegetables, but the gold cloaks kept them at bay. Kevan rode quietly, ignoring the insults. Soon they entered the Red Keep's outer courtyard. Robert dismounted, handing his reins to a stable boy. Kevan and his knights did the same. The tension only grew as they passed into the grand foyer leading to the throne room. Ned walked beside Kevin, noticing lines of worry around the older man's eyes. Kevin might be less flamboyant than Jaime or Cersei, but he was still a lion in the heart of it all. In the throne room, they found the dais prepared. Guards lined the hall. Robert took his seat on the Iron Throne with Ser Barristan and 2 other Kingsguard to his sides. Ned stood at the foot of the throne. The 5 Lannister knights accompanied Kevin a short distance inside, then waited as he approached alone. The hush was profound. At the far edges of the room, courtiers and lords watched with bated breath. Kevin went to one knee, removing his helmet entirely and setting it aside. "Your Grace," he said, voice echoing in the vaulted space. "I come on behalf of Lord Tywin, Warden of the West, who begs the courtesy of hearing what you would require to release Cersei and Jaime Lannister." Robert's knuckles tightened on the throne's metal arm. "Begs, does he? The letter I received said he refused to come bowing to me, so he sends you instead." "Very well. Stand and speak." Kevin rose. "Your Grace, my brother acknowledges that differences have arisen. He regrets any pain that has befallen your royal person. However, he disputes the charges of incest as slander. He believes a fair trial is required for the Queen and Ser Jaime. He asks that, pending trial, they be placed in honorable confinement. Say, in the Red Keep's royal apartments, under watch but not in the dungeons." Robert's face flushed. "Does he now? He dares to call my accusation slander? I have proof aplenty. As for the dungeons, that's too good for them, but I'll not release them to soft pillows. They can rot in chains until their trial." He leaned forward on the throne. "I should kill them both where they stand, and your brother knows it." Kevin's gaze flickered. "Your Grace, Lord Tywin loves his children, guilty or not. He is prepared to pay a handsome ransom for their release pending a sworn trial. 10,000 dragons each, if you will hold the trial in the presence of the great lords of Westeros, ensuring its fairness." A ripple went through the hall at the sum. It was substantial, yet Robert sneered. "You cannot buy me, Lannister. But coin is coin. What else does Tywin offer?" Kevin cleared his throat. "He also offers a marriage alliance with House Baratheon to help mend the wounds. He suggests that Myrcella or Tommen might be wed to a suitable Baratheon or allied house in the future, ensuring peace. And he will forego any claim of the children to the throne, acknowledging that if you have an heir by another marriage, that heir shall succeed. In return, the children remain under your protection, not harmed or disinherited beyond the question of the throne." Ned felt a slow burn of anger. He offers marriages and gold, but refuses to concede that Jaime and Cersei are guilty. Is your lord brother truly blind? Kevin lifted his chin. He believes any guilt must be proven. And I must tell you, Lord Stark, he denies that my nephew or niece would ever harm Lord Arryn. He contends Jon Arryn died of a fever, not murder. Ned let out a sharp breath. We have testimony. We have evidence. And as for the children's parentage, it is plain they share none of the king's features. We have the records that Jon Arryn studied, proving the Baratheon line's black hair. How many bastards of Robert's have you seen, Ser Kevin? They all favor him. Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen favor the queen's brother. The realm sees it now. Kevin's countenance was carefully neutral. I will not argue genetics with you, Lord Stark. I am no maester. I convey only Lord Tywin's position. He also wishes me to say that if Jaime or Cersei come to harm before a trial, he will bring the full might of Casterly Rock against the crown. Robert gave a dark laugh. He threatens me in my own throne room? Bold. Kevin bowed his head. I speak the truth as commanded, but my brother desires no war, only an equitable resolution that preserves the honor of House Lannister and the crown alike. Robert glowered. Equitable resolution? That's rich. My entire reign has been marred by your family's deception. They murder my hand, defile my marriage, and pass off bastard children as mine. He stood, looming. You say your brother wants no war? He has a queer way of showing it, given his army's muster in the west. Let him come to King's Landing or to Riverrun, bend his proud neck and beg my pardon. Then we'll talk. Kevin's expression tightened. Your Grace, he cannot do that without risking his life or the life of his children. You hold them in your power. He must ensure they are not harmed. If he wants them safe, let him come, Robert snapped. If not, I'll see them both tried and punished for treason and murder. And if your brother marches, I'll meet him in open battle. He pointed a thick finger at Kevin. That's my final offer. A hush fell. Kevin stood silent for a moment, shoulders tense. Then he inclined his head, just a fraction. I understand, Your Grace. I ask your permission to remain in King's Landing for a day or two, to gather more details and ensure I carry back an accurate account to Lord Tywin. After which, I will depart under the same pledge of safety you have granted me. Ned and Robert exchanged glances. The king shrugged. As you wish. You will be housed in the Tower of the Hand under guard. You will not see Cersei or Jaime. Speak to them and I'll see you put in a cell as well. Is that clear? Clear, Your Grace, Kevin murmured. Thank you. Robert turned and waved an arm in dismissal. Ser Barristan, see to it. I'm done with Lannisters for the day. Go, Ser Kevin, and keep your men in check. Step out of line and you'll regret it. Kevin bowed once more and withdrew. His 5 knights followed. The hush in the hall broke into murmurs again as watchers digested what had just happened. Robert sank back onto the throne, exhaling shakily. Ned stepped closer. You handled that well enough, Ned said softly. Ser Kevin is more moderate than many of his kin. Perhaps we can glean some advantage from his presence. Robert rubbed his temples. We'll see. I'll not be bought or threatened. Ned, if Tywin won't yield, let war come. Gods have mercy on the realm. Ned's heart clenched. The die was indeed cast. Unless Tywin relented, a sword storm was on the horizon. And all the while, the once Lion Queen and the Kingslayer waited in their cells, cunning and dangerous. Ned felt no triumph, only the heavy load of the realm's fate settling across his shoulders. That evening, Ned summoned Kevin Lannister to a modest receiving room in the Tower of the Hand. Outside, Stark guards stood watch, ensuring Kevin's knights did not wander. Candles flickered on the table between them, illuminating Kevin's weary features and Ned's stern countenance. I appreciate you coming, Ned said. I would speak plainly. You know your brother will not find a welcome in King's Landing unless he yields. But perhaps there is a path to spare thousands of lives. If Jaime and Cersei were to confess, or if Tywin acknowledged their guilt, we might avoid total war. Joffrey is disinherited, Tommen and Myrcella likewise. But they need not die, nor even be exiled if it can be avoided. Kevin inhaled slowly. That is asking a great deal. My brother's pride is vast, and Jaime is his heir. He would never see Jaime put to death. Jaime flung Bran Stark from a tower, crippling him for life, Ned growled, the memory still raw. He likely conspired to murder Jon Arryn, and he attacked me in the streets, killing good men. The realm sees him as a monstrous traitor. Robert will never let him go freely. Kevin's face flickered with brief sympathy. I understand your anger, Lord Stark. Jaime has done dreadful things out of misguided loyalty to my sister. But that is not enough for Tywin to abandon him. Ned's lips thinned. Then we face war, and Jaime's life is forfeit in any case. I doubt he can best the entire realm if your father chooses the sword. Kevin dropped his gaze to the candle flame. I will do my best to counsel Tywin toward peace. That is all I can promise. Ned studied him. If your counsel fails, tell your brother that the might of the realm stands with Robert. The Vale, the Stormlands, the Crownlands, the North, likely the Riverlands too. The Reach may remain neutral or might side with the Crown. The Lannisters cannot hope to defeat us all. Kevin's voice was somber. It would be a long, bloody war either way. But Tywin has alliances too. Many houses that fear a strong Baratheon throne might curtail their power. He can promise gold beyond measure. I do not say this lightly. I fear that once swords are drawn, the land will bleed red. Ned nodded. That is why we must avoid it if possible. But the king's justice cannot be denied. Jaime and Cersei must answer for their crimes. Kevin said nothing for a time, only staring at the flicker of the candle. Then he stood. "I will speak to my brother as strongly as I dare, Lord Stark. May the gods help us if my words fall on deaf ears." Ned rose as well. "I pray they do not. Good night, Sir Kevin." The Lannister bowed curtly, then departed, guards escorting him. Ned remained, feeling the swirl of conflicting loyalties and ambitions like a whirlwind. None of the possible endings seemed entirely bloodless. He could only hope Tywin would see reason and spare the kingdom a bitter conflict. Days later, Sir Kevin departed the city under the same white flag, riding west with the knowledge he'd gained. Robert did not relent in his preparations for war, nor did Ned. Ravens flew daily. Soldiers drilled in the yards. The small folk watched anxiously, for every rumor pointed to a collision between the lion and the stag. Cersei's wails from her confinement occasionally echoed down the tower halls, while Jaime rotted in the dungeons, pacing like a caged panther. Sansa's face was pale these days, as if the tension weighed on her. Arya grew restless, practicing her stances in the Godswood with Syrio. King Robert continued to drink more than was wise, but at least the threat of war kept him from vanishing to brothels or hunts. He grumbled, paced, and swore, but remained in the Red Keep, an uneasy lion tamer awaiting his adversary. On the 10th night after Kevin's departure, Ned paced alone in his solar, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. He thought of the darkest possibilities. Tywin ignoring all attempts at peace, forging secret alliances, and marching with overwhelming numbers. If that happened, the crown must either fight a pitched battle in the Riverlands or risk a siege in the capital. War would bring horrors unimaginable, yet Eddard Stark could not see a way around it. He had acted to reveal the truth. Whatever followed was the price of justice. He would face it as he always had, with honor and steadfast duty. The bells of the city tolled a solemn note at midnight, as if heralding the realm's uncertain future. Ned stood by the window, gazing at the faint glow of the moon on the black waters of the bay. The air felt heavy, expectant. He could almost smell the tang of iron in the wind. Far away in the west, Tywin Lannister's banners would be rippling, golden lions readied for war. Beyond the horizon, the world waited for the final break of the storm. And in the Red Keep, Cersei and Jaime Lannister stewed in their confinement, their fates bound to the next move of the father who had shaped them both. Ned silently prayed that some miracle might spare the innocents. Yet he steeled himself for the more likely path, blood and battle on the fields of the Trident once again. Robert Baratheon had claimed the throne on that battlefield years before. Now the stage was set for a new conflict. The future of the Seven Kingdoms would be decided by the ambitions and pride of great houses, and by the relentless pursuit of truth that Ned Stark had unleashed the day he publicly revealed Joffrey's bastardy at the Tourney of the Hand. So ended the calm before the tempest. The horns of war had begun to echo, and not even the walls of King's Landing could keep out their cry. Yet Eddard Stark would face what came as he always had. A man of honor, determined to do right by the realm, even if it meant wading through darkness and death. The tapestry of the Seven Kingdoms had unraveled at the seams, and now all that remained was to see what pattern would emerge from the chaos, and whether House Stark, House Baratheon, and the throne itself would endure the convulsions to come.